business links with China and Russia. Opposition politicians accuse Starmer of misleading Parliament. It's a blow to the Prime Minister who promised to clean up UK politics. What seemed a logical choice for his representative in Washington, a Labour Party power broker, turned out to be a poisoned chalice. Even the success of last year's deal to reduce US tariffs faded in the face of Mandelson's biggest liability. In February, the depth of his friendship with a convicted sex offender was revealed in the so-called Epstein files, leading Starmer to apologize, but it may not be enough. The saga has already claimed the jobs of several senior government officials, including Starmer's chief of staff, himself a Mandelson protege, and a senior civil servant in the Foreign Office, Ollie Robbins. He was aware of the vetting issue early last year, when security officials advised against giving Mandelson the highest clearance. Starmer's approval ratings, already sliding in recent months, have plunged on this scandal. And with local elections set to take place in the UK on May the 7th, polls suggest the results could be punishing for Labour and its leader. The political danger for Keir Starmer is clear. If he did know about the issues with vetting, then his credibility is in trouble. And if he didn't, well, that casts doubt over his own authority and control over his government. Sonia Gallego, Al Jazeera, London.
Well, let's speak now to Jonah Hull. He's in London following the story for us. Jonah, good to see you. So Keir Starmer is expected to make a formal statement in Parliament in the coming hours. What are we expecting to hear from the Prime Minister?
Well, we expect to see Keir Starmer stand up in Parliament behind me there in front of MPs and deliver what he's described as the full picture over quite how and why he was kept in the dark and therefore they were kept in the dark about this whole Mandelson security vetting affair, that he failed his security vetting for the post of US ambassador in Washington at the end of 2024. Civil service officials in the Foreign Office then overturned that judgment about his suitability for the job and allowed the appointment to go ahead. The most senior of whom, Ollie Robbins, was sacked over the weekend for it. The government clearly laying this at the feet of the civil service. He will appear on Tuesday and explain, Ollie Robbins, why he saw fit to not tell the government or the Prime Minister about what had happened and instead allow it to go ahead without any government knowledge or prime ministerial knowledge at all. And that all gives rise, as you heard there, to this central accusation now that Keir Starmer misled Parliament. That is a cardinal sin, if indeed he did so intentionally when he told them repeatedly that due process had been followed. It now is clear that is not the case. But he is likely to admit that while he misled Parliament, he did so inadvertently. And you might think on the evidence that that sort of absolves him. Well, it doesn't, because a lot of his opponents, opposition leaders and other critics are calling for his resignation. They simply see this as yet another, the latest episode in an unravelling premiership, the latest bit of evidence of a Prime Minister who they see as having an insufficient grip on detail, the machinery, the mechanics of government, and indeed a Prime Minister who repeatedly displays poor judgment, in this case, the determination to see this man, Peter Mandelson, for all his faults, and all of them indeed on public display, be appointed no matter what as ambassador in Washington.
And Jonah, you say that Keir Starmer is repeatedly being accused of poor judgment. I'm curious to find out how bad this situation is becoming for the Prime Minister and how much political pressure is this causing him?
Well, there's already been a huge amount of fallout over this Mandelson scandal, arguably the worst, but not the only, of his tenure in office. You may remember in February last year, it was widely thought he was about to be ousted by his own cabinet colleagues over revelations that he knew more than he'd said about the depth of the friendship between Mandelson and the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. That, for all sorts of internal political reasons, ebbed away. His stock has risen over his handling of the war in Iran, his refusal to get involved on the side of the United States. But again, this reopening of the Mandelson case just shines a spotlight again on what, as I say, many people see as repeat mistakes, repeat poor judgment, weakness in office. And with local elections around the corner expected to be extremely bad for Labour, this may be the moment when faith and trust in Keir Starmer really begins to ebb fatally away.
That's Al Jazeera's Jonah Hull live for us from London. Jonah, thanks so much for unpacking all that for us. Japan has withdrawn a tsunami warning after a magnitude 7.5 earthquake struck off the northern coast. Emergency services briefly urged more than 128,000 people in 3 prefectures to move to higher ground. There were no reports of immediate damage. Some bullet train services had to stop after the powerful tremor. A gunman in the U.S. state of Louisiana has killed 8 children, including 7 of his own. The victims were aged 1 to 14. Police killed the gunman after a chase. Dmitry Medvedenko reports.
Residents of Shreveport, Louisiana, say they're stunned and devastated by a violent mass shooting that woke them up early on Sunday. The police say Shamar Elkins shot the mother of his children, wounding her, and then drove to the house where his children lived and went on a shooting spree. He killed 7 of his own children, another child, and wounded another woman. The youngest child was only 18 months old. Media reports say Elkins and his partner were going through a bad breakup.
This is entirely a domestic incident. So the suspect shot the mother of the child children first, then responded to this location and shot 8 children, 7 of which being his own. There was an additional child at this residence that was not akin to him. However, we're still working on relationships and whose parents are whose, but it's a very hectic scene. There's a lot to investigate, a lot to unpack, and we want to do the best we can to come up with a clear timeline, a clear reasoning, even though cases like this, the reasoning will never be fully understood.
Police said some of the children were trying to flee through the side door, now riddled with bullet holes. Elkins then hijacked a car at gunpoint and drove off, but was chased and killed after a police pursuit. The city's mayor said nothing like this has ever happened here.
I think the community is in the process of gathering together. You see lots of people on the street here that are gathering for prayer and mutual support, and that's what communities need to do in this circumstance.
This is the worst mass shooting the U.S. has seen since January 2024. Last year alone, the country saw more than 400 mass shootings where at least 4 people were killed or injured in every event. Dmitry Medvedenko, Al Jazeera.
Supporters of Peruvian presidential candidate Rafael Lopez Aliaga are calling for election results to be annulled, alleging fraud. While international observers noted some irregularities.
It's hard to communicate this to many a politician, but if you want lower interest rates, don't push for lower interest rates is usually the best way of getting lower interest rates.
Doesn't work. That's not a good pundit talking point. And honestly, on Instagram, that really just wouldn't fly, John.
You know,
he uses truth on Instagram.
They want to clip those little videos.
Yeah, exactly. They're going to be like,
if
you want to hike, you lower rates. It doesn't really work.
Coming up tomorrow, Chris Ferrone of Strategas, Andrew Sheets of Morgan Stanley, Savita Subramaniam of Bank of America, and Dana Peterson at the Conference Board from New York City this morning. Good morning. Thank you for choosing Bloomberg TV. This was Bloomberg Surveillance.
Welcome to the world of decentralized finance.
Why is it that NFTs have not recovered in the same way that, say, Bitcoin has?
Bloomberg is covering all things crypto.
It's a pretty spectacular story.
The people.
This is the future. This is the 21st century economy.
The transactions.
It snapped up nearly $1 billion of Bitcoin.
And the technology.
We need to build a digital Fort Knox.
That gives people financial freedom, and that's a wonderful thing.
That's extraordinary.
We ride the wave that is Bitcoin.
Bloomberg Crypto, only on Bloomberg.
What some of these generative AI models look like they're going to do is they're going to reduce the cost of producing content to basically zero. So that will be a multiplier effect on the things that we're already seeing, which is that there's more people producing more content and reaching more people. And there's a lot of good and bad that comes downstream from that.
I don't know if you can break down what the average person is seeing right now in terms of stuff that's AI generated versus, maybe more traditional human generated, but what's that going to look like in a year or in 5 years?
There's actually a lot of hybrid content, and too often we talk about synthetic content and organic content and never the shoe shall meet, but there's a lot of content where AI is part of the workflow, right? Like you might not even know it. It might be whatever app you're using to do color correction might be using models to do so. Stamp tool and Photoshop.
Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and we are live streaming on Rumble, and YouTube. I set up the mic today, so hopefully you're happy with the audio. Please help support the work that I do by making sure that you subscribe to all the channels. You can subscribe to YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. You can also subscribe to my Substack, TikTok, Patreon, X, and GETTR channels. If you like the content that I create, all this is for free. Please help support the work by sharing the links, making sure you subscribe, make sure that you hit the thumbs up, and go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. I have a lot of great products on my store. I have ebooks, supplements, and course material on immunology and pulmonology. So with that, please help support the work that I do. You can also donate on Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee on my website. You can be a paid member to my Patreon channel and my Substack channel. All these videos I do are for free, so please help support the work that I do. Greatly appreciate it. So we're going to go over the news today. The markets are going to be opening up in about 30 minutes or so. We have the futures for the S&P 500 down right now. It's at 7,137. It's down about 24 points, so I suspect that the morning session is going to be down today. Oil is trading now at $87 a barrel, and natural gas is trading at 2.7. So on Friday, we had a major sell-off in oil and a decent rally in equities. But unfortunately, the ceasefire seems to be breaking down in the Middle East. What happened was later in the day, the Iranians were disagreeing with what Trump was saying, and throughout the weekend, the United States ended up boarding a tanker, hitting a tanker that broke the blockade or failed to listen to the warnings of the blockade. The United States hit the engine room and then boarded the tanker. So that's what's happening here. So in the Asian session, oil jumped up from about $82 a barrel for WTI to about over $90 a barrel, and then started drifting down a little bit. And now it's trading at 87, the 87 handle. So the question is, will the ceasefire truly fail or not? Supposedly, the United States is going to be sending our delegation team into Pakistan to try to seal a deal. But it doesn't look like the Iranians are really being honest about wanting to de-escalate and moving forward with the ceasefire. So it seems to me that the United States is going to most likely hit Iran with some sort of kinetic event. Now the question is will it be the Marines? Will it be airborne? Will it just be airstrikes? Who knows? But the probability of hitting infrastructure in Iran, like bridges and energy facilities, that probability is increasing. So with that, I think the energy markets are definitely going to be a problem. So please help support the work that I do by going to my website and purchasing the great products that I offer. I have structural nanosilver drops and lozenges. You can get the lozenges in Manuka honey and also in orange splash. Now these lozenges are larger than the drops, very high quality. They're made from structural nanosilver. I also have the drops in honey and lemon and in cherry flavor. Now, with the drops or the lozenges, you take them the moment you have that throat irritation, either during the cold season or during the allergy season. And well, what they will do is help to neutralize and produce a barrier for your oral pharynx so you don't get further problems. It's really important to take right away. You need them available in your home at work. You never know when you have this problem. In addition, if you're cleaning in the garage or the basement or in your house for spring cleaning, take them prophylactically to protect your oral pharynx. Super important. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nanosilver drops and lozenges. I also have digestive enzyme complex. Digestive enzyme complex will help to break up carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids and reduce the load on your pancreas. Super important. When you get older, your pancreas doesn't function as well. So to get the proper digestion and to reduce the load on your pancreas, it's really important to help by taking supplements that have digestive enzymes. This will help to break up your food, help you to absorb it, and digestive enzyme complex has bromelain in it, which will help to break up clots. So please go to my store, get the digestive enzyme complex, help the health of your pancreas. It's super important. And you'll be able to digest your food easier. And lastly, olive leaf extract. Olive leaf extract is dual purpose. It's going to help to boost up your immune system and help with your cardiovascular system. How it works is that it brings down inflammation and it helps to control your lipid profile. It'll help to lower LDL levels and increase your HDL levels. And with proper diet and exercise and taking the olive leaf extract, you're helping two major systems in your body, cardiovascular and your immune system. Now, when you improve your cardiovascular system, you're getting better blood perfusion to your organs. So your organs will perform better, especially your brain. So it's really important to improve your organ systems for brain health. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the olive leaf extract. Okay, with that said, what we're going to do is start paying attention to the news. We're going to wait for the market to open up. Again, the S&P 500 futures are down 23 points. They're trading at 7,138. I have a year-end target of 7,400 to 7,800 for the S&P 500. If you want a little bit more detail about market analysis, please take a look at my publication that I produced on Sunday. That goes over the S&P 500, the Treasury market, the oil market, some of the volatility indexes, so you get a better idea of the mosaic of what I'm seeing. So what we're going to do is listen into Bloomberg at the moment here.
They're making it through about these cargoes that are so important to especially Asia and European infrastructure. Are we getting any oil?
Not really. There was one super tanker carrying about 2 million barrels of crude that managed to sneak out on Saturday during that brief period where the strait was apparently open. One much smaller tanker of crude, about 700,000 barrels, also made it out. Those are the only two cargoes of crude that have made it out in the past week. And there's no sign of anything moving at the moment. As you said, Iran has closed the strait again.
What would it take? I mean, Julian, even if that announcement on Friday were to have held, what would it take to give ships even the confidence to get through the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, I think if you looked at what happened immediately after the statement was made by the Iranian foreign minister that ships would be allowed through the strait, there was a very significant movement of ships heading north from the United Arab Emirates into the Strait of Hormuz. But then everything changed and they got to sort of the most northerly point in the strait, and they were halted and turned back by the Iranian military. So there clearly was enough comfort among a significant number of ship owners, probably not everybody, to start moving as soon as they were given the green light by Iran. And so I think if some kind of a deal could hold, we would start to see ships moving out of the Persian Gulf. How many we would see going back in again, I'm not sure. That would be, I think, an added degree of risk, because you're effectively taking your ship into a closed area of water on the assumption that it will still be able to get out again in 4 days, a week's time. And at the moment, the way everything is changing so quickly, nobody has that kind of confidence, I think.
Julian, thank you very much for joining us. Bloomberg's Julian Lee. And in the next hour, we're going to hear from Eurasia Group President Ian Bremmer. That will be at 10:30 a.m. New York time. So stay with us for that conversation. In the meantime, top strategists.
If the ones that are watching the telemetry feed on my YouTube or my website live stream, you'll notice that there's a drop in oil now. It's at $86.23. And UCO, the ETF that with long oil, has also dropped. But I don't see any news specifically about why that is.
From the S&P 500 EPS growth. We don't see that right now. We see Brent at near $85 per barrel. And we see that earnings estimates are going up. The rule of thumb is traders keep saying that, that will not impact, demand, that will not impact margins. And the 13% earnings growth estimate for the first quarter earnings of the S&P 500 would be the 6th consecutive quarter of double-digit gains. So we're talking about really strong fundamentals and really strong corporate America.
So basically, oil doesn't start to break the bull case until it's over 110.
For the remainder of the year.
Right. So significantly over, or over for a much longer period of time. Are we seeing repositioning, though? I mean, are traders really going into, there's a great story on the Bloomberg today about, that we need to be positioning into energy, into defense, into like these ProSec trades, as Peter Cheer calls them from Academy Securities. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing the MSCI global equity indexes. The sectors that are up the most this year are related to energy, are related to natural metals. So yes, AI becomes, this front and center as, earnings estimates are going up. At the same time, we're seeing traders reposition, because it's not all just about the AI trade. It's about national defense. It's about security. The aerospace and defense sectors are going up. So it's a double-edged sword at this point. Yes, AI and tech is still the game of the town, but also some of the neglected areas are doing really well right now.
All right, Elena, thanks very much for joining us. Elena Papina runs our stocks team for Bloomberg News in this building. Check on markets right now. We're looking at S&P futures that are lower, but only about 0.3% after a pretty massive rally on Friday. Interesting that investors were willing to hold risk through the weekend. You would have thought they would be concerned that something bad would happen, and something bad did happen, and yet it's not really hurting futures much at all.
It's not, I was on Bloomberg this past weekend, and I was speaking with Christina Ruffini, and she was like, stocks have gone up so much, and now we have this news about the Strait of Hormuz being closed in. We're probably going to get a massive sell-off on Monday, right? And I was like, I doubt it. I doubt it. We're pricing in the path to peace. That's enough, not actual peace itself.
Yeah, traders clearly looking through this. You have, again, the rally in oil, but it's not really huge compared to what we've seen of late, right? We had seen at one point Brent go to 120 in the depth of this crisis, and we're only trading at less than 95 right now. Let's get a look at some of the individual stocks on our radar. Adobe will team up with Microsoft, Anthropic, OpenAI, and NVIDIA to power an AI agent for business. They're all going to work together.
I don't think they left off a single name.
All right, what we're going to do is listen to Al Jazeera here about the Marines going on that cargo ship.
Both sides can show in a way or another their power. They can also maneuver to gain more points and chips on the table. So what we are seeing, what we saw in the Sea of Oman, complements what could happen in Pakistan, in Islamabad, on the negotiations table.
Ali, thank you very much indeed. Ali Hashim there talking to us from Tehran.
Well, China's criticized that U.S. attack and the seizure of an Iranian cargo ship in the Strait of Hormuz on Saturday. The foreign ministry has urged all parties to take advantage of the window for peace and to restore the normal flow of traffic.
The situation in the Strait of Hormuz is sensitive and complex. China expresses concern over the United States' forced interception of relevant vessels and hopes that the parties concerned will act in a responsible manner, honors the ceasefire agreement, avoid aggravating confrontation and escalating tensions, and create the necessary conditions for the restoration of normal passage through the strait.
Well, joining me to discuss these latest developments, Jamil Khan, a senior Pakistani diplomat who's previously served as the country's ambassador to the UAE, Libya, and Malta. He's in Islamabad. And also joining us from London is Ali Garumaya. She's a senior policy fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations. Thank you to you both. Ambassador, I want to start with you first. What do you think, from Pakistan's point of view, we could expect from these second round of talks, should they go ahead? Our correspondent, Osama bin Javed, was telling us from Islamabad that as far as Pakistan is concerned, it believes that the talks will start.
Yeah, Pakistan, in fact, they have kept all their preparation, both diplomatic, political, as well as the security the arrangements, all in place. And Pakistan is hoping that in the next about 24 hours to 48 hours, the talks would resume. And there are many reasons for it. There's a lot of homework done, as a matter of fact, at all levels, at the military diplomacy level, at the traditional diplomacy level. And it's not that it was done for a couple of days. It's being done for the last so many weeks. And one more thing I would like to underscore, that Pakistan and Iran, we have very deep-rooted relations. And some of our officials here in our organizations and institutions, they have very good relations with the Iranian leadership, and both at the backtrack, the back channel diplomacy, as well as at the level that we see every day, the efforts of Pakistan, which it is making at its Chief of the Defense Forces level, and also at the Prime Minister level. So with all these factors in mind, we in Pakistan here, and I'm also at the moment in Islamabad, and after having met certain people at the leadership level, I still feel that there is very intense discussions going on between Iranian leadership and of all institutions there, and the Pakistani the leadership, both in the military institutions as well as the civilian institutions. And therefore, we are having a very strong hope. Even the hotels which have been vacated for housing and hosting the guests from Iran. And
okay, I'm gonna pivot over to the U.S. news about the Iranian ship seized. But before we do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the C60. C60 is a very strong antioxidant. It is 1,000 times stronger than vitamin C. Take a teaspoon a day, every day, to soak up free radicals. You can get it in extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, and MCT coconut oil. You can get it in a 2-ounce, a 4-ounce, or an 8-ounce configuration. By soaking up free radicals, you're reducing stress in your cells, you're reducing inflammation, you're soaking up free radicals, you're improving the health of your mitochondria, you'll have more energy, you'll have more ATP, your tissues will perform better, your endocrine system, your immune system will improve, your glands will improve, your cardiovascular health will improve. Why? Because you're soaking up free radicals and reducing the concentration of oxidized LDL. When you do that, you have less plaque formation, super important. In addition, C60 also helps with brain function by improving the health of your neurons, boosting up the mitochondrial health, reducing inflammation, reducing stress in the neuron, and therefore your neurons will have better connection between each other, and therefore you will think faster and you'll have better memory. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the C60. Again, you can get it in a 2-ounce, a 4-ounce, or an 8-ounce configuration. It is cheaper per ounce to get the higher ounce configuration. Take a teaspoon a day, every day, preferably on an empty stomach, such as the morning. If you take this before a workout, you'll also notice that you're recovering from your workout quicker. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the C60, take it every day. It will also help the basal layer of your skin, so your skin's improved. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. Make sure you use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order.
My colleague, Bowen Kedrovich, for guiding you throughout the last several hours, bringing you any updates from big breaking news stories that we have been following, but also showcasing those live events. My name is Carla Lahara, and I will do the same. Let's pivot, though, from Pope Leo's visit and his tour across Africa and touch on one of the biggest stories of the day, and that continues to be possibly some peace talks between the U.S. and Iran happening today in Pakistan, though those talks are still up in the air. Bringing us out to a live image that we have at the Strait of Hormuz, this is courtesy of Marine Traffic. The Associated Press saying this: the U.S. attacked and seized an Iranian-flagged cargo ship it said had tried to evade its naval blockade near the Strait of Hormuz on Monday. It was the first interception since the U.S. blockade of Iranian ports began last week. Iran's Joint Military Command vowed to respond, throwing a fragile ceasefire into question days before it expires this Wednesday. Also, Iran on Monday offered a new death toll for the war, with its forensic chief saying at least 3,300 people have been killed in the conflict. Now, the figure came as the head of Iran's legal medicine organization said only 4 of the dead remain identified. President Trump just yesterday saying that U.S. negotiators will be in Pakistan today for another round of talks with Iran, but Iranian officials did not directly respond to his announcement. A 10-day ceasefire in Israel and Lebanon appears to be holding. Those are just some of the major bullet points there happening throughout the Middle East as this conflict continues. Some escalation can be seen. I do, though, want to stay focused here on the latest happenings at the Strait of Hormuz, because as we just mentioned, the U.S. did announce that it seized an Iranian-flagged cargo ship that it said had tried to evade its naval blockade near the Strait of Hormuz. Taking us out to a social media post courtesy of Rapid Response, but first, I want one from Reuters as well. It's one of the news outlets that's covering this very closely. They give a bit of a brief overview as to this entire situation that we're following closely. I'm going to bring that in just a second. Here it is. The U.S. military saying it fired on an Iranian-flagged cargo ship as the vessel sailed toward Iran's Bandar Abbas port. Iran's military said the ship had been traveling from China. A lot to get to this morning, so joining us next to talk about all of these developments is Rocky Weitz. He is a professor of practice of maritime studies at the Fletcher School at Tufts University. Rocky, good morning. Good to see you.
Good morning.
It's become a kind of a tradition. Every Monday you join us here just to recap everything that's happened over the week. And throughout the weekend, a lot of developments. So let's start with that major one that I just mentioned. So some outlets are reporting that U.S. seizure of the Iranian vessel, it is, quote, a notable escalation. So in your assessment, how big of a deal is this latest development when compared to the other things we've seen there in the Strait?
Yeah. All right. Well, good question. So, yeah, it's been a very fluid situation, I would say, over the last 4 days. We saw oil prices really plummet on Friday when the Iranian foreign minister came out and said the Strait is open. But then the U.S. maintained its blockade. And then the Iranians came and said, well, then, we're going to continue blocking the Strait as well. And what we had here is, so the U.S. has blockaded now. We're entering week 2 of a naval blockade. And a naval blockade is an escalation by itself. It's considered an act of war under international maritime law. And essentially what we're doing here is enforcing the blockade. Most of the ships that have been faced by the U.S. Navy have turned around or avoided actual confrontation. This ship was different. It was coming in. It had been in China, Malaysia, coming in toward Bandar Abbas, which is a major port in the Strait of Hormuz. And for 6 hours, the U.S. kept telling it to stop or turn around. And then in the end, they fired 3 shots from their 5-inch gun and took out its propulsion system. So, and then after that, once it's dead in the water, they boarded a group of Marines And so now it's under U.S. control. So I do think it would be considered an escalation. And as we heard, the Iranians have said they're actually not coming to the negotiations, even though we're still sending our people. I think the negotiations probably will happen, but as I said at the very beginning, it's a very fluid situation. So we'll just have to see.
It remains to be seen indeed. Speaking of, I want to showcase President Trump's social media post regarding that seizure of that vessel. So in case you haven't seen it, here it is. I'm going to read it in full. This was a statement from Sunday. He says, quote, "Today, an Iranian-flagged cargo ship named Tuska, nearly 900 feet long and weighing almost as much as an aircraft carrier, tried to get past our naval blockade, and it did not go well for them. The U.S. Navy guided missile destroyer USS Spurance intercepted the Tuska in the Gulf of Oman and gave them fair warning to stop. The Iranian crew refused to listen, so our neighbor's ship stopped them right in their tracks by blowing a hole in the engine room. Right now, U.S. Marines have custody of the vessel. The Tuska is under U.S. Treasury sanctions because of their prior history of illegal activity. We have full custody of the ship and are seeing what's on board." So it pretty much speaks to what you just surmised there, Rocky, within that last answer. And it brings me to this next question. We're seeing here the U.S. is imposing a naval blockade on Iranian ports, Iran responding sometimes by restricting or attacking shipping in the Strait. How does maritime law interpret the legality of these operations from each of these sides?
If you experience sexual abuse at any of the New York City juvenile centers, schools, hospitals, universities.
Yeah, very good. So in some ways, the U.S. attack on that Iranian cargo ship was in response to the Iranians attacking some third-party ships that were attacked in the Strait. So the Iranian actions would not be considered legal under international law because there is a right of transit passage for third parties. And the other thing is they didn't announce on the radio turnaround, or there were no radio communications. So they just went and essentially machine gunned the ships. And so those ships that did turn around, but that's an escalation there. And then the U.S. complied with international law, which is what we do. The U.S. Navy does is that we announced. 6 hours of announcement. This was no surprise coming. They also announced, please remove your crew from the engine room. We're about to fire. They gave plenty of warning for that. So the U.S. did comply with the rules of naval warfare, and because the U.S. has announced a blockade, which you can do when you're in conflict with a nation. Essentially, the argument by the international lawyers that would be representing the Trump administration would be, we're in conflict with Iran. We don't want weapons being sent in, and so we're going to pause these ships for inspection or turn them around before they enter the Strait of Hormuz. And because they didn't comply, then we ended up disabling the propulsion of the vessel with some shots into the engine room. And now the Marines are inspecting the ship. That's going to be a little hard because it's a container ship and they have to unload some of the containers to get to the containers below. It's unclear where they'll do that. But I would say one last point. I think what we're witnessing, because I've studied Iran for 30 years, is that the leadership of the IRGC, or I'd say the third string of the leadership at this point, there's a division there. So the Iranian foreign minister came out and said, everything's okay, we're on track, essentially saying we're on track for a negotiated settlement of this dispute.
I think this is a very good point that Rocky's mentioning here, that there's infighting that is happening within Iran, and that this is very similar to other episodes in Iran's modern history, post the Shah being overthrown by the Ayatollah. And that there's a secular part of the society, and there's also this more very orthodox version of Shiite fervor that's taking place in Iran. And because of that, I think Trump may be working with someone that is a little bit more moderate or maybe right of center in terms of their politics, but they're getting a lot of strain, a lot of stress and strain from the religious community within Iran. And so there's almost infighting. It's as if for Iran to really become a contributor to modern global economy, right? And not be just some, religious state. There needs to be a civil war that takes place within the country. And so we're maybe seeing the beginnings of that. In addition, the Saudis do not want the Shia religion taking hold because, one, the Saudis are surrounded. Hold on, I had a little bit of a. The Saudis are surrounded by different factions that are aligned to the Shia faith, like Yemen, 30% of the East Coast, the coastline that goes into the Persian Gulf. For Saudi Arabia, it has a Shia constituency. Then you have Iran, and you have Hezbollah and Hamas. There's this world this world cannot reach homeostasis until Iran solves their Shiite problem. They have too much control of the military apparatus. And you probably are seeing a group of people within the country wanting to have peace and align with the ceasefire and de-escalate, while you have another very strong constituency within Iran not wanting that and potentially is fighting internally in the country. So it's almost as if Iran needs to go through a civil war for really everyone to have this truly be resolved, right? The markets are open. So let me just do a quick update before we go back to the professor from Fletcher School. The S&P 500 is trading at 7,109. VIX is at 18.84. I was expecting VIX to be above 20, so I'm a little surprised at that. The Euro USD is trading at 117, so actually the dollar has gained a little bit relative to Friday. The Japanese yen is trading at 158.67. Bitcoin's trading at just below 55,000. I'm sorry, not 55, 75. It's trading at 75,000. And natural gas is trading at 2.687. It has been going down for the pre-market. And oil is trading at 85.76. So actually, things are relatively stable based on what happened over the weekend, which is a bit surprising. All right, we're going to continue with the professor from Fletcher School, Dr. Weitz.
And then I think he was undermined by a rival group within the IRGC that sent those boats to go and shoot the vessels going through the strait, but not even trying really to comply with international law. So I hope that helps.
Speaks to some of the conflicting messaging that we have seen throughout this entire scenario and how it plays out. I have a social media post here also. This is on X, courtesy of the Department of War Rapid Response. It just outlines it here, Rocky. It's quite long, but I do want to read the first point. It says U.S. forces operating in the Arabian Sea enforced naval blockade measures against an Iranian-flagged cargo vessel attempting to sail toward an Iranian port on April 19th. And then it kind of goes into the weeds of how this entire operation was conducted. Rocky, let's talk about what happens in these moments? So how do ship owners and operators, how do they make these real-time decisions in an environment that is not just sometimes inconsistent in terms of the messaging they get, but also pretty hostile?
If you're a man who makes at least $150K a year and you feel self-conscious about your gut sticking out, I'll get you shredded or you won't pay it.
This is a really tough situation for those commercial shipping companies. So they all do want to leave and get their product out. And they do have the reinsurance to do it. But that being said, just like when you have an insured car, you don't actually want to have to go through the insurance process. It's such a pain, right? So they don't want their ship disabled or sunk, or they don't want their crew hurt. So much of the shipping industry has been taking a wait-and-see approach. I think what really tells us is what happened on Friday. So on Friday, essentially you had a unified message from the Iranian foreign minister plus the Trump administration saying straits open. And we saw a bunch of ships start to go through, including some cruise ships, but also some oil tankers. And then the cruise ships were fast enough, they actually made it through. And then the tankers were attacked, and then they turned around. And so it's a very confused, conflicting situation. So I think what we're going to see for the next couple of days is probably a wait-and-see approach, which we've been seeing now for 50 days in the Strait of Hormuz. So we actually saw almost a record low of transits through the strait over the weekend. Almost no ships went through once those two ships were attacked by the IRGC group that attacked in the Strait of Hormuz. So they're kind of back in anchorage in the Gulf. There aren't many ships coming in either. I think they're all waiting outside to see what happens. And then, of course, we have the ceasefire deadline coming up on Wednesday local time, which is Tuesday our time. And so we'll see what happens there. But I think we're in kind of the final part of kind of a game of chicken, frankly, between the Trump administration and the Iranian negotiators. And we're going to just have to see if they can come to a deal under that time pressure or not. And if not, then whether the Trump administration gives an extension, says, oh, it's going okay, we just need a little more time. Or if negotiations are off, then I think we might see some U.S. military strikes, particularly around the Strait of Hormuz on that northern coastline in Iran, to try to disable some of these small boats that the Iranians had been hiding in caves. They were hard to get out, but we would send aircraft and maybe some Navy forces to really to try to set those back so that commercial shipping could at least pass through Omani waters, kind of at the far southern end of the Strait of Hormuz. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be an exciting week, I think.
Speaking of some of these negotiations that we're still waiting for, this is a social media post from Fox and Friends. It says, last chance, Iranians still haven't agreed to attend peace talks with the U.S. on Tuesday. President Trump told Trey Yings, who is a Fox News correspondent, quote, if the deal isn't done, the deal that we made, then I'm going to take out their bridges and their power plants. If they don't sign this thing, the whole country is going to get blown up. So harsh words there, a lot of the same rhetoric that we have been hearing. I'm bringing up the live radar system here just to give some context to our viewers. So the green dots that we see here are tanker vessels, and then the red dots are, the green dots are cargo vessels, and the red dots are tankers, just so that everyone can follow along and kind of see how the movement is at this time. I mean, clearly some ships still trying to get in there. Some progress is trying to be made. Rocky, let's talk about the markets. They've been reacting sharply. You mentioned it right off of the top. Oil prices went up. Hang on, let me go back here and find. All right, so the Associated Press saying this. Oil prices jumped. Stocks are mixed. Today, oil prices climbed more than 5%, while world shares were mixed Monday as the standoff continues between the U.S. and Iran. The U.S. benchmark crude gained 5.3% to $87.88 a barrel, while Brent crude, the international standard, it was up 5.3% at $95.62 a barrel. So how also is what we're seeing in the markets shaping some of the decision making here when it comes to those naval operations? What has stood out to you the most as we've seen all of this play out?
Yeah, so really it's I would say that the short answer is it's a volatility situation, highly volatile. So we saw actually a 10% drop on Friday of oil prices. Really, it was clear that and takers started moving, the markets responded, but then the markets closed on Friday, and then we had all the tumultuous news of the over the weekend, and then everyone kind of comes into the office on Monday. Trading is going to start here soon. And it already started in Europe, right, and Asia. And so oil prices are down. Oil prices are up. They're still down compared to where they were on Thursday. And I think it's because we're in this sort of final stage of a possible negotiation where you do have the U.S. delegation is going to Islamabad. That takes a lot longer to get to from Washington, D.C. So if they're there, but the Iranians don't fly over. Iran's a neighboring country to Pakistan, so it's much shorter flight. If there's no negotiations, then I think oil prices will probably go up because they'll assume that this is going to be a more extended conflict. If negotiations happen, then I think maybe they'll stay where they are and kind of do a wait and see approach. The oil markets have been very, very volatile over the last couple of weeks, in part because the news keeps changing. And this negotiation, in many ways, is playing out on social media in public. And therefore, the markets react a lot to that. As a matter of practical reality, if oil doesn't start being exported through the Strait of Hormuz and liquefied natural gas and fertilizer as well, we're going to see a lot of real price pressure and even some supply shortage. We're already seeing them in Asia and Europe to a smaller extent, and things like jet fuel that can't be stored very easily. That's going to go first. So the economic consequences are going to be real. As we've talked about before, it's going to hit Asia the worst, then Europe, and then last us. And we're in a little bit better position because of the oil production that we do in the U.S. Plus, actually, Venezuela has had the greatest increase of oil production of any oil producing country in the world, actually. So, and much of that's flowing into the United States, where our refineries have actually tuned to their very heavy crude. So the U.S. is better positioned geographically to weather this storm. But as we've talked about, a supply disruption anywhere increases prices everywhere. It just takes longer to get here to the Americas.
Finally, Rocky, you mentioned something there that I want you to touch on. The fact that we've seen a lot of this play out in social media.
All right, I'm going to pivot to another video here. But the S&P 500 is trading at 7,106. The support level near term is 7,000. If that breaks because of bad news coming from the Middle East, a major support level is 6,600. And a resistance level for the S&P 500 is going to be 7,250. Now, oil is trading at $86 a barrel right now. So it has been drifting down since the European session. Let's listen into Fox News about the U.S. Marines taking over Iranian ship after blowing up engine room.
You gotta have the best to be the best.
Giving my son a needle during an allergic reaction is traumatic for both of us. So we said, hello, Neffy, the only needle-free.
All right. Before we start with that video clip, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the heirloom barley. Heirloom barley will help to bring down inflammation, help to soak up free radicals, and help to detoxify your body. That will help to boost up your immune system and your endocrine system, help with your cardiovascular system, even your brain function. Why? By soaking up free radicals, detoxing, and bringing down inflammation, you're allowing for your bodily systems to improve, to heal, to perform better. Super important. So if you take this and you're working out, you'll also notice that you're recovering quicker from your workout. So it's really important to take every day. You can stack this with Boomer Boost to get added benefits. So please go to my store and get the heirloom barley or the gladiator barley and detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals through superoxide dismutase. Now, the difference between gladiator barley and heirloom barley is you get one added benefit with the gladiator barley, and that is it'll help you to build muscle. Magnesium and zinc helps to boost up the immune system and helps with brain function. Super important to take every day. A lot of people aren't taking enough magnesium to help with their brain function. Vitamin C and magnesium, super important for your immune system, skin, and brain function. You can stack them together for synergistic benefit. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And lastly, I want to talk about collagen. This is a great product. It's new on my store. And what this will do is help to remodel your joints if you have a sports injury or arthritis. What it'll do is it'll block certain types of enzymes that will erode your joint. All right. So if you block those enzymes, you're stopping the erosion. That's really important. Secondly, it also blocks Ep4, which that enzyme produces inflammation. So you're blocking the inflammation. You're also blocking some pain receptors. You're blocking some pain that is being generated from the erosion of your joint and that inflammation from that joint. So this is really important. Now, in addition, it'll also help to recruit and utilize collagen type 2 and glucosamine to help to build up that cartilage. In addition, it will also help to use ACAN and chondroitin to help with the cushioning of the joint. So you're blocking enzymes to prevent inflammation and pain. You're blocking enzymes that will erode your joint. You're helping to rebuild that joint with the cushioning and the cartilage. So you get a lot of benefits from taking collagen. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the collagen. Now you can also stack it with the collagen that I have. This collagen will help with your skin, your hair, your nails, your musculature, your bone density, but also your joints. It has a very comprehensive, typical amino acid profile. And by taking this every day, you're going to help to build up your joint. Now, it's perfect to stack these two together. All right. So get the collagen and the collagen if you want to help to rebuild that joint. Now, the other part to rebuilding your joint is actually doing some light resistance training or opening up of that joint. So what you have to do is let's say you have an elbow issue, and when you extend the elbow, it hurts. Well, what you have to do is open up the elbow up to the point of pain and go a little bit beyond the pain, a little bit more, and hold it for about 20 seconds. And by doing that, you're training your body to slowly send signals to remodel. And over time, you'll be able to open it up more without pain. But it takes time. It takes a lot of time to do. To help speed that up, by taking the collagen and the collagen, you're going to be able to help to remodel that joint and improve it. Now, again, you can do this for a sports injury. You can also do this for arthritis. But the earlier you deal with this issue, the better. Because over time, if you don't try to remodel that joint by exercise and remodel that joint by taking the proper supplementation, what will happen is those enzymes, MMP3 and MMP13, will erode the joint. And that inflammation continue to erode the joint. So you want to keep the inflammation down. This is the reason why taking a lot of these supplements that will bring down that inflammation are really important. But also you need the ingredients and the supplementation that help along the remodeling of the joint. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the collagen, it's a month's supply, get the collagen, take it every day, do these little exercises that I just mentioned. And by doing this, you'll be able to slowly improve your joint. The earlier that you do this, the better. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Make sure you use discount 5. You get $5 off any order, all caps, discount 5. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last.
All right, back to war. Today, U.S. officials are set to arrive in Pakistan for a new round of peace talks led by the Vice President, J.D. Vance. But Iran is reportedly refusing to come to the table.
So this all comes as Tehran vows retaliation after the United States seized one of their ships in the Strait of Hormuz.
Our chief foreign correspondent, Trey Yinks, joins us from Tel Aviv with the latest this morning. Hey, Trey.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. Overnight, CENTCOM announced that U.S. forces seized an Iranian-flagged cargo ship in the Gulf of Oman after it tried to breach the naval blockade. President Trump announced the seizure on Truth Social overnight, saying, quote, the Iranian crew refused to listen, so our Navy ship stopped them right in their tracks by blowing a hole in the engine room. Right now, U.S. Marines have custody of the vessel. The ship remains in U.S. custody. Here's what it sounded like when the guided missile destroyer USS Spruance warned the cargo ship before firing.
Vessel Tosca, motor vessel Tosca, vacate your engine room. Vacate your engine room. We're prepared to subject you to disabling fire.
Whoa, what's that? I just built a budgeting app in Base 44. Guys, Nina just built an app.
Impossible.
Nina can't code.
Interesting. Can it generate reports?
It can now.
Nice.
So you're saying we can all build apps now?
Yeah.
At least 24 other vessels were turned around over the weekend, complying with U.S. orders. The incident came 24 hours after Iran's IRGC fired on 2 vessels trying to pass through the Strait of Hormuz in violation of the ceasefire. Now the question remains if a broader agreement will be reached this week. The ceasefire is set to expire in less than 48 hours. I spoke with President Trump over the weekend, who told me if the deal isn't done, the deal that we made, then I'm going to take out their bridges and their power plants. He went on to say, if they don't sign this thing, the whole country is going to get blown up. Now, Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson today held a press conference saying the Iranians have not yet agreed to talks on Tuesday and that they are currently reviewing U.S. proposals. Guys?
So there's a chance, Trey, that we have a vice president going 18 hours to Pakistan to meet with an empty room.
Yes. At this point, the Iranians say they've not yet agreed to attend these talks on Tuesday. And overnight, state media was saying the talks weren't even going to take place. The Iranians have played these games before and then ultimately showed up at the negotiating table. But this is largely considered the last chance for the Iranians. When I spoke with the president over the weekend, he was very clear. They are going to sign on the dotted line, or he's going to target their bridges and power plants. And it's a decision that Iranian officials have to make. And I'm told by regional sources today there is a divide among Iranian leadership about what to do and whether or not to call the president's bluff. But the president isn't bluffing. This is a very similar situation that we saw before Operation Epic Fury began. The United States is giving the Iranians an off-ramp here, a chance at diplomacy. And if they don't take it, the war is expected to resume. Guys?
Trey, what's the latest with the U.S. Marines that did board that vessel in the middle of the ocean? Because we saw some video of them going down from the helicopter and landing on that vessel, the Iranian vessel. Are our men and women who are doing this, are they okay?
Yeah, we understand that they're okay and they still have control of this Iranian flag cargo ship. This is a significant moment because it is an indication that if the Iranians try to test the U.S. naval blockade, their ships will be seized. And we talked about this. U.S. Marines boarding vessels. And this is exactly what happened yesterday when they tried to test the resolve of the U.S. Navy. We do know that at least 24 ships actually turned around and they heeded the warnings from U.S. forces in the region. But these warnings were very clear. They were put out over radios directly to the vessels saying that if you approach this line, this blockade, your ships will be seized. Warnings were even given to this cargo ship and they didn't heed the warnings. And ultimately this led to U.S. forces firing on the engine room of the vessel, stopped the vessel in its tracks, and then those U.S. forces boarded the cargo ship.
All right, Trey Yanks, thanks so much. So it looks like the Iranians are playing games again. They said, the foreign minister spokesperson, that the United States hasn't learned from its past lessons. They're saying that they can't negotiate with the United States because they've been attacked during previous negotiations. And they're saying that the naval blockade was a violation of the ceasefire. Okay, whatever. But what worries me is that Pakistan is trying to convince the president of the United States to end the blockade because they feel like that's hurting negotiations. I'm sorry, that's just a non-starter. And if I'm the president of the United States, there's no way I'm sending the vice president to negotiate with these people. They're playing games, they're trying to delay, and it doesn't look like the leadership there has any control of the IRGC. They're attacking on their own right now.
Well, you heard what the president said. They violated the blockade. So that's their first violation over the last 24 hours. And then the president's.
And this is the point that I'm making. The IRGC seems to be, or at least factions within the IRGC, seems to be running roughshod to, some of the leaders that we're negotiating with. So that means that there's an internal struggle that's happening because of this overzealot Shiite philosophy that they have in Iran.
Said, fine, I'll threaten to blow up the bridges. I'll threaten to blow up the power plants if no deal is made.
Yeah, there's a new person in charge. It looks like the IRGC commander, Ahmed Vahidi, and other members of the inner circle have basically told the foreign minister to step back. So the foreign minister, as intransigent as he's been in the past, was considered less than a hardliner, but he was somebody looking for a grand bargain. The IRGC is not. So they're more fatalist. They actually want to go back to fighting. As far as I can tell, they want to go back to the fight. And they maybe have to pay the ultimate price because they don't feel like they're beat up enough. And we have not even touched another one of the Iranian nuclear facilities, is Pickaxe facility, which we don't seem to have. There are no munitions on the planet that can penetrate deep into the mountain.
And the foreign minister is the one that has the relationship with Jared and with Witkoff. He's been the one negotiating with them so far.
I know that's
maybe they're not happy with him.
Yeah, I just think they have two ultimate goals. I think some of the political guys want to stop it now and see, do the best deal they can get. The RGC thinks they're winning. By surviving, they think they're winning, and then they'll solidify more support.
Well, they also have disjointed leadership as well. You got the one person that's running the RGC, but they're also broken into these little militias. And so you have these people that are hardliners, and they want to fight to the very end. It's a suicide mission, but they don't care about it. It's unfortunate what's going to happen to the country their country as a result of their hatred in their heart.
And what's even more unfortunate is to know that there are Americans here that live on our soil that are trying to help the Iranian government. There was a lady that was arrested, a female Iranian national arrested at LAX at the airport over the weekend. And the federal authorities say she's 44 years old. This happened Saturday night on suspicion of trafficking weapons on behalf of the Iranian government.
Yeah, she's from Iran. Shamim Mafi, 44 years old, as you mentioned. She arrested right before she was set to board a flight to Turkey, an Iranian national and a lawful permanent U.S. resident. We see all the things that came up in the last few weeks is that we have all these Iranian officials who have friends and family teaching at our colleges, living amongst us, a life of luxury. And this woman is actually trying to sell and buy drones while living in this country.
Yeah, so we already know the threat that Iran poses. We know that they have tried to kill American citizens. We know they've tried to kill refugees that are supportive of the United States. And it appears that no vetting was done on this person. Kudos to the FBI, though, Ainsley, for being able to capture her before she completed her plan.
Yeah, she's expected to appear in a U.S. district court this afternoon in L.A. She faces up to 20 years if she's convicted. She's an Iranian national, became a lawful permanent U.S. resident in 2016. You mentioned FBI. Here's Chris Swecker, former assistant FBI director.
Penny, for your thoughts. Do you think I could retire early? Good question.
In the beginning, there was only potential.
All right. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the lignans. Lignans will help bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals. It'll help to improve your endocrine system and your immune system, help with your cardiovascular system. Super important. You can take it separately, or better yet, take it with the stack that I'm going to tell you. Turmeric brings down inflammation and soaks up free radicals. Super important. Helps with the immune system, your joint health, even your cardiovascular system. And ashwagandha root brings down cortisol levels and helps to control your blood glucose levels. That will help to improve your immune system and bring down inflammation. Now, when you stack this together, it's a very powerful stack to slow down the aging process. The turmeric, the lignans, and the ashwagandha root, take it every day. And by doing that, you're slowing down the aging process. You're helping with your endocrine system and your immune system, brain function, your cardiovascular system. You'll have more energy because you have less stress on your cells. So your cells will perform better. Your mitochondria will perform better. But if you follow my advice and you take these stacks, you're targeting the major pressure points of aging, and you're going to be able to slow down the process. So please, go to my store, use discount 5. You get $5 off any order. You spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. Get the lignans, the ashwagandha root, and the turmeric. Stack them together for max benefit. Super important. And also, getting a probiotic is super important for your health, your gut health, but your overall health. Good health starts at the gut. You can get the VeggieCap version of the probiotic that I have on my store, or the powdered version. I prefer taking the powdered version because I take a lot of different powders for my lunch, supplementation. So get the probiotics. And what the probiotics do is improve your gut lining, allow you to absorb your nutrients better, reduce allergies because you have less leaky gut, and you're going to be able to improve your sleep and your brain function. Good gut health actually improves your sleep. And you'll be able to detoxify your central nervous system with good sleep. You're going to be able to consolidate memories. So your brain function is going to be better. Plus, you'll be well rested. In addition, with a good gut, you're improving your metabolism. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the very high quality probiotics that I offer. Again, make sure you use discount 5 and you get $5 off. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's listen into Maria Bartiromo.
That's the sound of an American oil company hard at work. Want to be a part of it? Listen up.
Hello, my name is Adam Ferrari, and I'm...
Welcome back. More flare-ups over the weekend between the U.S. and Iran as questions loom about who is controlling the Strait of Hormuz and markets react. President Trump told me yesterday morning that Iran claiming to close the strait is inaccurate because the U.S. already closed the Strait of Hormuz with its naval blockade. Now, China is attempting to grow its stockpile of oil and gas with reports of a 2 million barrels a day surplus in the month of March. Meanwhile, new U.S. intelligence finds Beijing is considering giving Iran advanced X-band radar systems, which would significantly improve Tehran's ability to track incoming threats and track the United States. But of course, last week, President Trump told me that Xi Jinping responded to him in a letter saying that China is not sending weapons to the Iranians and will not. Joining me now is Gatestone Institute Senior Fellow Gordon Chang. Gordon, good to see you. This is getting interesting here with this shipping vessel, which has been going back and forth between Iran and China, and the U.S. boarded it last week. Your reaction to all of these new flare-ups over the weekend, Gordon?
This was an important move, Maria, for the United States to seize that ship, because obviously it was headed for an Iranian port. That's a clear violation of the blockade as announced by President Trump. And it's an act of will that tells the world that the United States is as good as its word. And I'm sure that they heard that in Beijing. A lot of people say, oh, the Chinese are playing this long game on the Iran war. Well, no. Xi Jinping is a very short-term ruler acting irrationally most of the time. And we have a sense that essentially Xi Jinping doesn't have any cards to play. He cannot stop the United States. So this is very interesting. I think the war is working out well because President Trump has decided that he's going to win it.
Yeah, and he said the other day in my interview that he's been so tough on Beijing. He talks a lot like, this is my good friend. I'm going to go have this meeting on May 14th. But at the same time, what he does is actually pretty tough in terms of what he's done with oil and gas, from Iran to Venezuela to the comments on Cuba. What do you think about this meeting? If hostilities open again and re-emerge in the Persian Gulf, and this agreement is not signed tonight, I wonder if the trip to Beijing is in question again, Gordon. What do you think?
If the war is continuing by the middle of May, I don't think President Trump is going to want to go to Beijing because the political costs at home would be far too high. Clearly, China is an enemy combatant. It supplied that targeting satellite information to the Iranians. They allowed the Iranians to take over a Chinese satellite. We have seen these reports of Chinese weapons, including these supersonic anti-ship cruise missiles that the Iranians fired at the Abraham Lincoln at the end of last month. This report about passive radar and so many others.
What Professor Chang is mentioning here is what I've been saying all along. The Iranian war is the first step of the United States moving the chess pieces around to potentially fighting China in the Asian theater. This is not an isolated incident, nor was Venezuela an isolated incident. They're a coordinated, strategic move to circumvent China's rise. In addition, not only are we going to be able to control the oil, but if we can be successful in the region, we'll be able to slow down and hopefully prevent this one road initiative that they have going into Eurasia. All right. That whole region is super important for China, for energy, for circumventing the hegemonic power of the United States. So when everyone was saying that we're going into war for no reason in Iran, that's not true. There's a global strategy of what's happening here. So an America First policy, being a pacifist in the Middle Eastern region, is not going to help us when we have to go to war with China. So this is really important. And all these people that were demonizing, oh, Trump's administration is being run by Netanyahu and the Israeli lobbying group. The reality of the situation is that there is a benefit of being able to solve the problem in Iran, overthrow the government, reduce the Shiite power in that region, be able to control the oil that is going to China, and it gives us more leverage to prevent China from actually invading Taiwan. So the America First individuals out there are going, well, so what if China invades Taiwan? They're not paying attention. China wants more than just Taiwan. They want to be able to control that whole region. They want to control everything inside the 9-dash line. That means that we won't have freedom of navigation. In addition, they want to put stress on the second island chains. Well, that means their archipelago for Alaska is going to be at risk. Japan is going to be at risk. And also Guam, some of the islands of Hawaii that stretch out westward, because Hawaii is more than 5 islands, which most people don't realize, but 100 islands or more. So it's really important to understand that success for the United States in this region is not for the benefit of Israel. It's for the benefit of the United States checking the hegemonic power of China.
So China, clearly is on the other side, and President Trump, in the middle of a war, can't go to the capital of an enemy combatant. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, that's right. Good point. Though, look, Gordon, we've got at this point the economies of all of these nations really seeing an impact. I mean, you've got to believe that President Trump is thinking about economic warfare here, squeezing Iran, and yet Beijing claims to record higher than expected or higher than anticipated growth. They say their GDP came in at 5% in the first quarter. That would be up from 4.5% the previous quarter. China's central bank is holding lending rates steady for an 11th straight month. Do you buy these numbers, first quarter GDP at 5%, even with the fact that they're getting squeezed on oil and gas from Iran, Gordon?
No, I don't buy those numbers. First of all, they're not consistent with many underlying indicators. And also, they're not consistent with what the Chinese central government is doing. We saw in the last 10 days all of these rules that are meant to punish foreign companies that are leaving China. That's not the act of a government that is growing that has an economy that's growing at 5.0%. So, you look at all of this and you say the Chinese economy can't be growing that fast. And by the way, retail sales during the quarter up 2.4, exports up 2.5, but industrial output was up 6.1. And that suggests that if there was growth, it was because China was producing products that it could not sell either at home or abroad. That means there's going to be a buildup of inventory. That's a really bad thing for an economy. So I just don't buy the numbers that are coming out of China. They are just too good to be true.
Yeah. Meanwhile, we are kicking off our AI week this week, Gordon, and just in time for our deep dive on artificial intelligence, we've got this video. A Chinese-built humanoid robot beat a human in Beijing's half marathon. Can you imagine? It completed the 13-mile race in 50 minutes and 26 seconds, roughly 7 minutes ahead of the human record. I don't want to see this guy on the battlefield, that's for sure. But what's your take on what China is doing with these humanoid robots?
China is by far the world's leader in humanoid robots. And this half marathon yesterday was really unbelievable performance. These robots this year, they beat last year's record by 1 hour and 50 minutes, which shows you the remarkable improvement in the humanoid robots. You got to put this, though, in perspective, because China's high-tech manufacturing, according to official numbers, only accounts for 6% of China's GDP. So, yes, these robots are fun to watch. They are important, but they are not significant because the rest of the Chinese economy is a black hole.
Yeah. Here's the president when I asked him about China and AI. Watch this. So should government have some safeguards? Should there be a kill switch for some of these AI agents?
There should be. But let me say, we're leading in AI. We're leading China by a lot, actually. We're building plants that nobody ever imagined before. And it's going to be a tremendous, bigger than the internet. It's going to be tremendous. And there are always difficulties when you're at this stage of something. But, when you mentioned banking, it could also make banking much bigger, much safer, much more efficient.
So, there are threats with AI, Gordon, and that's what we're digging into this week. But China's trying hard to beat the United States on AI, on space, on the economy. Not number 2 superpower. Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, on space, we're ahead on both the race to the moon, as we saw with Artemis 2, but more important, we're ahead on the race for the moon because of reusable rockets. Yes, we're ahead of China on AI because our chips are far better than China's. And I would hope that President Trump would not allow the sale of advanced American chips to China, because the only way that they can beat us is with our own equipment and our own chips. We should not be providing them to China.
All right, we will leave it there. Gordon, always a pleasure. Great talking with you. Thank you so much, Gordon Chang, a wealth of knowledge on China.
To our Stock Movers Report. Listen for 5-minute audio reports on the biggest winners and losers in the stock market. Subscribe to Stock Movers on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you listen here. Got a lot of stuff going on out there on the geopolitical front. News as we speak. I believe Vice President J.D. Vance is in the air, will land in Pakistan in a moment in terms of hours. So hopefully maybe get the...
There is a deadline coming up.
There is a deadline coming up. And so let's maybe get something done because it was a tense weekend.
It was because we were supposed to have talks this weekend. That didn't pan out.
Yep.
And supposedly the Strait of Hormuz was open, but it may have been open for less than a day before Iran closed it once again.
Let's check in with Golnar Mohtavali, Iran reporter for Bloomberg News. Golnar, what's the latest in your part of the world? Uh-oh. Golnar.
We've had quite a few statements from the Iranians today. This morning, we've heard that kind of two different messages coming in. One, that the Iranians want to keep the door open for diplomacy. We had the President Pezeshkian say that Iran still believes that diplomacy is the only effective solution to the crisis and the conflict that's going on. At the same time, we've had a lot of pushback against any talk of the Iranians possibly joining these new round of talks in Islamabad. For the time being, we don't really know. We don't know whether the Iranians are going to turn up for those talks, but we just have to wait and see. Things are changing every day with this story, as you know, and we just have to watch the rhetoric very closely,
right,
hour by hour even.
Yeah, the rhetoric from the U.S., as Paul mentioned, is that J.D. Vance, the vice president, is on his way, along with what people are calling Witkush, which is Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, the other representatives speaking on behalf of the U.S., while Iran has not yet committed to any discussions. In terms of who, Golnar, my question is, when it comes to Iran, who is calling the shots there? Is it the parliament speaker? Is it the foreign minister who, I believe, on Friday posted on social media that the Strait of Hormuz was effectively open? Is it the IRGC, which controls the missiles and security forces and is patrolling the Strait of Hormuz?
I think there's a lot of discussion right now about who's really making the decisions, whether there are rifts at the top of the leadership. I think there was a piece in The Economist that kind of tried to kind of flesh out this idea. And I think there's a danger of kind of simplifying what's happening at the very top of the leadership structure. We know that there's been a lot of reorganization, not just since this war started, when Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader, was killed in the first Israeli airstrike on February 28th, but going back to the June war last year, that 12-day war. Because so many of Iran's top military commanders and also several of its senior officials connected to security were killed, both in June and in this latest war, Iran had to kind of very quickly readjust command and control and also the civilian government leadership infrastructure. And what happened in that restructuring was that there was a kind of compression, and there has been a compression of the military apparatus together with the civilian government, And so I think there's actually much more confluence between the IRGC and those senior officials who have been in civilian government for a long time. For instance, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, much more than we think. So I think there is a danger of separating these two things out too much and trying to find rifts where they may not exist at the very high chain.
She's totally wrong.
But I think what we can say is that we've definitely seen amongst regime supporters within the hardline political faction disagreement over whether to agree to a ceasefire and in the more medium to longer term, a permanent agreement or some kind of...
The bottom line is this: the Shiites do not want to stop this. They believe in some sort of holy war. And the only way you fight that is killing them. You have to go and kill them. You can't do ceasefires, can't do peace agreements. This is only... If Trump doesn't kill off the IRGC and the funding mechanism to Hezbollah and Hamas, and doesn't help boot up some sort of constitutional republic in Iran, then this is kicking the can down the road for something much bigger. And unfortunately, we're going to have a president that won't be able to deal with it or is too scared to deal with it. Trump is our last hope on making sure that we solve the Iranian problem.
All right, we're looking at the markets here. Red and green on the screen here. The S&P is down 10 points. The Dow's up 2 points. The Nasdaq's down 88 points.
All right. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the omega-3. Omega-3 will help with your cardiovascular health. It helps to bring down inflammation and helps you to control your lipid profile. Super important to help to bring down LDL levels and increase your HDL levels. When you do that, you have less plaque formation. When you have better cardiovascular health, you have better perfusion to your brain. Better blood flow to your brain means that you are giving your brain the nutrients it needs for proper health and function. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the omega-3. Now it's really important to understand that the Shiite religion doesn't want Sunni religion, and they will create havoc to fight against the Saudis. All right. And the Saudis has about, I don't know, around 20 or 30% of its population are Shia, especially on the East Coast of the country. So you have holy war that's going on top of using the oil revenues to fund terrorism in the region. But not just that, you do have these fundamentalists that are educated. It's not just the seculars that are educated. You have some of these fundamentalists that are educated and therefore have the money from the oil revenues to be able to do development of nuclear and other weapons of mass destruction. In addition, if you look at the history, the United States was aligned with Iraq back in the 80s to fight against Iran. Iraq used chemical weapons on the Iranians. So the Shiites have this historical memory of the 20th century that is allowing them to recruit into their belief system to fight against the West and to fight against the Sunnis. So this is a holy war. It's a combination of a holy war and a war against Western civilization. It's a combination of the two. Now, does it mean that the United States didn't make any mistakes going all the way back to the 1950s? Of course we made some mistakes. Same thing with the Saudis. The Saudis made mistakes too. And even the Israelis. But the point here is that we're not going to get a permanent ceasefire unless you absolutely destroy. You can't get permanent peace or a legitimate ceasefire unless you destroy this theocratic regime within Iran. So, I think there are fractures within the society where you have the leadership and the IRGC not aligned, and there's conflict there. Now, the leadership doesn't want to get overthrown by these zealots from the Shiite religion. So it seems to me that the leadership will capitulate, allow for the zealots to determine foreign policy. And this is going to just continue to escalate. Trump is going to have to hit. They're not going to be truly trying to negotiate a ceasefire and truly try to negotiate a de-escalation of violence in the region. The Shiites want the nuclear power, the nuclear weaponry, to be able to extend their terror on the Saudis and on Western civilization. You can't deal with these people. They're crazy. It's so the only answer is to kill them. And Trump, he's a little afraid, you know, the international community, blah, 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 the cost. But the thing is that there's a holy war going on top of them attacking Western civilization. It's a combination of the two, is how I see it. But the only way to win it is complete destruction and absolute annihilation of that country's religious apparatus. Shiite religion in Iran has to be destroyed to a level where it can't reconstitute itself and have power. They're crazy. They'll never, ever grow up. Can you imagine, let's say, like a adolescent having nuclear power, having nuclear weapons? Of course not, because their brain isn't fully developed. This is the Shia religion. This is the same thing. They're adolescents. They're in an adolescent phase within their religion. It's a relatively new religion, and they're relatively immature. So they should not have nuclear weapons. But you have all of these America First pacifists that say that we can't be in the region because it's not to the benefit of the United States. Well, it will be for the benefit of the United States, because we'll be able to check the hegemonic power of the Chinese if we can control the oil flow and be aligned with some sort of stable government in Iran. But not just that, by eliminating the terrorism and that terrorism threat from the region is going to give world peace. But America pacifists, they don't want that. They think that, it won't come home to roost. Oh, you know what? It might come home to roost. How do you know that the Shiites don't have sleeper cells in the country? You don't know that. You already have people trying to do weapon deals in the United States for Iran. I just see this as a holy war, and that the United States needs to have more fortitude. And unfortunately, the international community isn't willing to get on board with this. But this is only going to kick the can down the road if you don't destroy the theocratic regime in Iran. The IRGC has to be destroyed, because that's the military apparatus of funding the terror. The theology, the philosophy of the terror is coming from the religious clerics that are Shiite. So this is a holy war. And we need to win. Or are we going to just do Crusade 3.0 and lose? Stupid.
The stock market, in my view at least, is looking through the fog of war and is saying, you know what? The Israelis and the United States have done a terrific job from a military standpoint. The Iranians don't have another alternative other than to try to negotiate some sort of a peaceful settlement. And I think even though results over the last 48 hours...
It's too simple. The Iranians. Who are the Iranians? You have the seculars, you have the ones that are in power that are right of center, and you have the religious clerics running the show. And then you have the IRGC that's aligned with the religious clerics. So this catch-all phrase, the Iranians, well, it's a little bit more complicated than just the Iranians.
we're relatively early into the earnings season. When I put my note together on Friday, I guess we were only about 10% of the way through the earnings season. Revenues are running up about 10% over year. The earnings, frankly, have been running up 30 to 35%. And we're not going to end up 30 to 35%, but we could very well end up 15 to 20% by the end of the earnings season, and that's terrific. And the full year numbers are moving up as well, despite the significant spike in energy prices and the negative deleterious impact that that's going to have on inflation. So the earnings portion of the equation's in great shape. Stocks were down pretty significantly. So you look at that combination of increased earnings and multiple compression, and that frankly just made stocks more attractive. And so that to some degree has been the rocket fuel that's allowed this rally to play out over the last couple of weeks.
As much as we've seen stocks make a comeback and oil prices move as well, we haven't really seen treasuries respond in a similar way. And I guess for the U.S. Treasury market, the next big catalyst is the Kevin Warsh Fed confirmation hearing, which is scheduled to start tomorrow. The only problem is we know that there's going to be a hearing. We just don't know whether there's going to be a vote because Tom Tillis has committed to not vote until that investigation, the DOJ investigation into the Fed's renovation efforts is resolved completely. So how does this set things up? You know, Kevin Warsh might be talking about his take on monetary policy, but investors don't really have a sense of when that will be implemented.
No, your point is very well taken, and separate and apart from the noise and the nonsense associated with Iran, we went into this year expecting that there would be two significant hurdles that the equity market would have to get over. One was the leadership transition and the monetary policy transition in the Federal Reserve, and the second was the fact that we're in the midst of a midterm election year. Historically, there's a lot of volatility in the market associated with those two events. So the fact of the matter is that the market, has rallied really strong here. We're in an overbought position. And so depending upon how well or how poorly tomorrow's hearings go and what the status of Jeanine Pirro's investigation is in terms of the renovation program at the Fed, which Jay Powell is overseeing, and then the mortgage fraud or the alleged mortgage fraud of Lisa Cook, we may not actually get a vote from the Senate Banking Committee or the full Senate on Warsh's candidacy, in which case Jay Powell stays as the chairman or on a pro tem basis of the Fed past his retirement date of May 15th. So there's a lot of volatility here that the market is going to have to come to grips with at some point.
All right, Phil, thanks so much for laying that out for us. Phil Orlando, Chief Equity Market Strategist and Head of Client Portfolio.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the vitamin B complex. This will help to improve your cellular metabolism, help to protect your neurons, and increase your energy levels by improving on your production of ATP through the electron transport chain. Super important to take. If you're 40 years of age or older, you should be taking this, male or female. If you're 40 years of age or older, super important, go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin B complex. Resveratrol. Resveratrol will help to get rid of senescent cells, will help with youthful gene expression, will also help with the health of your mitochondria so you have more energy, more ATP. Also, resveratrol stacks really well with C60 to improve your basal layer for your skin, so you look younger. So please go to my store, get the resveratrol, stack it with the C60 for max benefit. Slow down the aging process. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. If you use discount 5, guess what? You save $5 on any order. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
Honeywell, either 3M has looked into selling assets too. What is it about these big industrials that at one point like to be big, like to be diversified, are now in love with the idea of slimming down, realigning their portfolios, divesting assets? What happened in the thinking?
We're seeing it across industries, not just in the industrial space. for whatever reason, every few years, diversification becomes popular with investors, and we see, GE buying NBC and those types of things to look back at history. And then eventually we get into spinoffs, which are now investors.
Let's listen into Victor David Hansen talking about why Democrat establishment hopes no else knew Swalwell was compromised. So let's listen into his take on, some of the corruption that's going on with Swalwell.
Welcome to Canes. It's Luke Bryan. What can I get you? Today I'm raising funds with Raising Canes and my buddy Todd Graves for the Brett Boy.
Hello, this is Victor Davis Hansen for the Daily Signal. Here in California, we're having a primary coming up in June. Since 2010 ballot initiative, we have so-called jungle primaries, where the top two vote getters, regardless of their party, will face off in the November election. Because we have an overwhelming Democratic registration majority, the Democrats pushed this 2010 ballot initiative with the idea that you would only have Democrats in the general election, and that's happened. And that happened with Eric Swalwell. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Eric Swalwell. He's been a 6-term congressman from Northern California, grew up in Dublin. He's a lawyer. He was in the first jungle primary, and he defeated the incumbent Representative Stark, I think his name was, and he's been there for almost well over 6 terms now. Who is he? He was very controversial. He's sort of rambunctious. He cuts these commercials about himself as an athlete. He was very vocal in Russian collusion, and he pounded that day after day that Donald Trump was a puppet of Vladimir Putin. He was on the House Intelligence Committee. He was a bitter foe of the chairman, Devin Nunes. He, if you remember, he allegedly got involved in a personal relationship with a Chinese consular official, or at least an ad hoc Chinese spy, political activist here in California. And he was on the House Intelligence Committee, not only got involved with Fang Fang, as we knew her, but he hired one of her associates on his congressional staff. So he was under a lot of controversy. And finally, his partisanship and his dubious reliability to maintain secrets while on the House Intelligence Committee, after having this relationship with Fang Fang of some sort, he was removed. And now we see him, he's back in the news, and he's running for governor. And he is polling either 3rd or 4th. The top 2, believe it or not, are Republicans, Steve Hilton and Chad Bianco, the sheriff from Southern California. And then Eric Swalwell in many polls is 3rd, or he's neck and neck with Stephen Hilton. And suddenly, the perceived favorite, Kathleen Porter, another House representative, she had kind of imploded because of videos that showed her as a bully and screaming and yelling at various staff members, and pretty much becoming on film an unsavory character. So what happened to Eric Swalwell? Well, on April 10th, his world blew up because suddenly, out of the blue, some of his congressional staffers, all female, came forward. And one of them said that she was raped by Eric Swalwell while intoxicated on 2 occasions. Another one said she was sexually assaulted. Another 2 or 3 said that he had a bad habit of forcing congressional women, many of them 20 years younger than he was, to sign non-disclosure forms so that they could not voice what he had done to them. And he had chronically, insidiously sexually harassed them. Now, the latest bombshell is people on his gubernatorial campaign staff have said that they believe that these charges are true, and some of them have resigned. And that's made There were other, this made a great controversy the last few days in California. There were other even more disturbing. In Anthony Weiner style, there were women who had been receiving text from Eric Swalwell, allegedly showing his genitalia, something like Anthony Weiner did that destroyed his congressional career. There were also stories that he was using campaign funds for his own child care. He has been married twice, his present second wife. They have 3 children, but reportedly he was improperly using campaign funds. Well, why did this come up right now? This is some of the stuff dates back to 2015 and 16. And apparently it was widely known among California politicos, both nationwide and in California, that he had been a serial sexual harasser, and yet no one came forward. The answer is analogous to Joe Biden. People knew in 2020 that he was non compos mentis, but they used him as a wax and effigy because the other candidates were not viable. And once he was elected, by staying in the basement, the Obama era of politicos took over his government, and we essentially had the most left-wing administration in modern history. And we called it the Biden administration. Today, you can't find any legitimate person who believes that Joe Biden was fit to serve. Then they said he was fit as a fiddle, sharp as a tack. So what's going on? Eric Swalwell is threatening to break up the Democratic field. There are more Democratic viable candidates than there are Republicans. The Republicans really only have 2 viable Republican candidates, and they are at the top. And the way that the primary voting looked like, you would probably see 2 Republicans only in the general election, kind of a boomerang to the Democrats who dreamed up and pushed this jungle primary over a decade ago. And so they got together. I imagine somebody got together and said, is it Swalwell or Porter? And they said, well, Swalwell has more baggage. Maybe it could leak out. He's kind of a loose cannon. And somebody's began leaking this. But what my point is, if Eric Swalwell had been way ahead in the gubernatorial race, I don't think that any of this would have surfaced. It would have been analogous to Joe Biden. He would have been a useful vessel, and he would have won the governorship, and the Republicans wouldn't have had a chance. It would have been Eric Swalwell versus probably Steve Hilton, and the Democratic vast majority in registration would have ensured that. But once it was clear that he and Porter had split the vote along with 2 other Hispanic candidates, Villagrosa and Becerra, it looked like the fragmentation would give the gubernatorial race to a Republican. And so then these leaks surfaced. And they're not just leaks. They come from a representative who was one of the most vocal critics of Harvey Weinstein, of all of these people who were caught up in the Me Too movement, and more importantly, of Judge Kavanaugh. Eric Swalwell was very criticized of Kavanaugh and said he was unfit to be on the Supreme Court. So there's a sense of nemesis, irony, karma in all of this. But the wider point I'm making is the Democratic Party, who brags that it's doesn't let democracy die in darkness, and it's the guardian, the protector of democracy, has a bad habit. When they feel that something is politically and antithetical to their agenda, whether it's removing a president, basically Joe Biden, they said, you're not going to run for re-election, and then anointing a new person, Kamala Harris, who had not one single delegate in 2024. She hadn't won a single delegate, and she was anointed without an open vote, at least initially. This isn't very democratic. She was the Democratic candidate for the presidency of the United States who had never won a single delegate. She was appointed because suddenly Joe Biden, after his disastrous debate performance, went from sharp as a tack to a buffoon and embarrassing, and he can't be on the ticket. Same thing is happening with Eric Swalwell. There was a decision made that some of the Democrats had to be thinned out, willed out, when, got rid of, kaput. And they chose Eric Swalwell once these allegations suddenly were untenable in their secrecy. They couldn't suppress it anymore. But the point is that I'm making, they knew about this. People in California are on record that Eric Swalwell had a reputation for being reckless in his personal life and untoward toward women staffers. Very ironic given his advocacy for women's rights and his Me Too activity. And so, as the Democrats always do, they made a decision that he should go out. And as I speak, he's being pressured to step aside and consolidate the Democratic vote, apparently behind Kathleen Porter. And it's typical for the Democratic Party of today to talk about democracy, but make these decisions who candidates are who will face the voters on backroom politics. Thank you very much, Victor.
This problem goes all the way back to JFK. Truman warned about the primary process within the Democratic Party, and that you have almost like this mobster mentality that takes place. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver soaps that I have in stock. You can get it in peppermint and also in lemongrass. Very high quality soaps. They'll help to neutralize and help the health of your skin. Use them every day. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And also, I have structural nano silver toothpaste. It's very high quality, has no fluoride. It'll whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, reduce inflammation at the gum line, and help the health of your gum line. With good oral hygiene, you can help your cardiovascular health and your valvular health. Super important. And because it has the structural nano silver, it helps to neutralize. Very important during the cold season, and just take it every day. Use it every day. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5. You get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. So get a few tubes of this toothpaste for your household. Use it every day and improve the health of your oral cavity and the health of your teeth. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, now we're going to go to Morning Joe, because we got to have a comment about Morning Joe. And they're complaining about how Trump is grappling with his fears, because Morning Joe is not only a lawyer, he's also a psychiatrist.
Welcome back. The Wall Street Journal is out with new reporting from behind the scenes at the White House entitled, "Despite his public bravado, President Trump is grappling with his own fears regarding Iran." According to the Journal, the operation to extract 2 airmen whose jet was shot down over Iran this month was followed by hours of the president screaming at aides, quote, "Images of the 1979 Iranian hostage crisis, one of the biggest international policy failures of a presidency in recent times, had been looming large in his mind." The paper reports the president is dealing with his own fear about ordering troops into harm's way. Trump has resisted sending American soldiers to take Harangue Island, for example, the launch point for 90% of Iran's oil exports. While he was told the mission would succeed and the territory's capture would give the U.S. access to the strait, he worried there would be unacceptably high American casualties. Still, he has made risky pronouncements without input from his national security team, including his post about plans to destroy the Iranian civilization, saying seeming unstable could help spur the Iranians to negotiate. A president who thrives on drama is bringing an even more intense version of his unorthodox maximalist approach to a new situation, fighting a war. He is veering between belligerent and conciliatory approaches and grappling behind the scenes with just how badly things could go wrong. Joining us now, the co-author of that piece, White House reporter for the Wall Street Journal, Annie Linsky. So, Annie, what else are you hearing about the president's feelings about this behind the scenes? And it seems to match pretty well, or track pretty well, with the way Iran is responding, which anybody with a sense of how things go with Iran is not surprised about.
Yeah, Micah, my colleague Josh Dossie and I set out to try to draw a portrait of the president at war. Donald Trump has had 2 presidencies, but he has never overseen a sustained military campaign like this. And while we, as Americans, have seen his very unique governing style in other aspects of his presidency, legislating executive orders and the like, we've never witnessed this type of sort of impulsive and his sort of desire to appear chaotic during wartime. So that was what we were trying to show and the reporting target that we had for this piece.
Annie, one of the things I thought was really fascinating about your piece was how there seem to be 2 parallel tracks happening that are not necessarily communicating with each other all the time in the White House. So you've got during the operation to try and rescue the airmen, you've got the security people keeping Donald Trump away from the situation because they thought he might make it more complicated. But then at the same time, you've also got the president on his own track launching truth socials about ending a civilization, for example, or praise be to Allah on Easter morning without negotiation and clearing those posts and going through the posts with his national security team. So how much is it the president just launching things and how much is it the national security team actually running the operation in the White House?
Yeah, those tweets, or I should say those Truth Social posts that took so many people off guard who woke up and read them about ending a civilization, saying, praise be to Allah on Easter Sunday of all days. Those were not tweets that he had even sort of chatted with his national security team about. They read them much the way we did after they were posted. The president did ask his staff about those tweets and said, how are they playing? What am I being criticized? And his staff said, yes, sir, you are. You're facing quite a bit of criticism for them. Some of his members of his national security team read them and saw, weren't as alarmed by them as many others were. They said, look, they felt that he was communicating the way the Iranians do. The Iranians have for years said, death to America, and believed perhaps this would get through to them in a way that the more restrained language that we're used to from a president perhaps has not. But you're right, that wasn't something that was being workshopped within the White House. As to that there was a long call that was open when the 2 airmen were down behind enemy lines, and that is an instance where the staff.
There's a few things here that I think that Morning Joe isn't really considering. One, the Shiites that wants to destroy the world for their religious, cause and destroy America, destroy the great Satan, right? They only understand force. They don't understand anything but force. So speaking in their language, I think is very, very important. In addition, when you knock out the energy grid, when you knock out the ability for mobility, it's like you are in the 1600s. So if you're in the 21st century and you're going to the 17th century in a blink of an eye, then yeah, it is civilization disruption. It is a destruction of a civilization. But there's an added level to this, and that is the theocratic regime within Iran and the funding of the terrorism and the management structure of the IRGC have to be destroyed. Their civilization of religious hate has to be destroyed. So what's wrong with that? What's wrong with snapping them into the 1600s? What's wrong with destroying their theocracy? What's wrong with talking to them in their language. And oh, by the way, the President of the United States doesn't need any advisors. There's no constitutional requirement that for every decision you have to talk to an advisor, and then, you know, everyone has a vote and raise their hand, and whichever side for any policy has the most supporting it, then that's the policy of the presidency. No, that's not how it works. The president doesn't have to talk to anybody, and he can make a decision. So what this is really about technocracy. It's about the experts are going to tell you what you should do. And if you go against the experts, then you're a bad person. That's what Morning Joe is all about. And oh, by the way, Mika, the daughter of Brzezinski, wrote a lot about the technocracy that is needed within government. The President of the United States doesn't need anybody's opinion. If he is desiring it for a full mosaic of ideas or perspectives, that's his prerogative, but it's not a requirement. He doesn't have to do it. He can make his decisions based on his own beliefs, his own experience, political calculation, economic calculation, whatever he uses, whatever lens of logic he uses is his prerogative. Now, because the world is complicated, it does make sense to listen to your advisors. But there's a time not to listen to the advisors. There's a time to listen to the advisors. There's a time not to listen to the advisors. So I don't like this intelligentsia that's this East Coast Democrat idea of a technocracy. A president can listen to his advisors and say, I think you're all full of manure, and we're going to do this. That's his prerogative. He's the president of the United States. Now, what's interesting, there's a documentary about Air Force One during 9/11. I highly recommend you see it. I just saw it yesterday. And what was interesting is that the Secret Service would not listen to President Bush. He wanted to go back to Washington. So the attack happened when he was at the school. He did his speech. They went up into Air Force One, and then they didn't know what they were going to do. He wanted to go back to Washington. And the Secret Service head decided to tell the president he can't do that. Not recommend, tell the president. So this is dangerous with the technocracy. We saw in 9/11 that President Bush Jr. wanted to be back in Washington, being able to manage the situation. And unfortunately, what happened was that the communications within Air Force One broke down, and he was basically not really knowing what was going on. And he had poor communication with the White House, with NORAD, with the FAA, and what was going on. So the communication systems actually broke down on Air Force One. They upgraded it, and hopefully we don't have that problem again. But the thing is that he had the instinctive feeling that you had to be in Washington managing the situation instead of being up in the air, floating around, and not really coordinating with operations of our response. The Secret Service prevented him from forcing the plane to go back to Washington. Now, he was very upset. There's some pictures of him being upset and yelling at Secret Service and his staff and all this stuff. The thing is that when he came, all right, so he was basically captive by the Secret Service on Air Force One. All right. Now, he was still president, but he didn't really fully have control of the situation. Cheney had more control of the situation than President Bush did. And the Secret Service kept him in the dark and, quote, to protect the presidency. When you have the Secret Service overriding a direct order by the President of the United States, that's a problem. What President Bush should have done when he came back to Washington, he should have fired everybody that was Secret Service on that plane. And or he should have directly had a direct order with the military staff that's on the plane to arrest the actual Secret Service head, which was preventing him to actually preventing Bush from commanding the plane to go back to Washington. There was a mini coup that happened during 9/11 in Air Force One, where the president was not allowed to be president and the Secret Service took over. That's a major, major problem. That's a major problem. They're not elected officials. The president is, the Secret Service not. Yes, they need to protect the staff and they need to protect the president and, and yada, 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 and the family and all this. But when the president tells them, I don't care, we're going back to Washington to coordinate our response to this terrorist attack, the Secret Service should not have had the ability to intervene and stop him from that command. And he should have held them, he should have fired them and had them arrested once they got back to Washington. He didn't do that, but he should have forced the issue. The Secret Service is not the presidency. They protect the presidency, but they don't have full control. When the leader says, I want to do this, they can't circumvent that. So what right now we have is a technocracy. What we have is a bunch of experts that think they know better. That's a big problem. What happens when you have an elected official that wants to lead the people in a different direction? That's all legal. It's all constitutional. When you have a bunch of technocrats preventing you from doing it. We had a coup that took place during 9/11 on Air Force One. The President of the United States was not in full control because of the Secret Service. That's a major problem. So you can expand this out to the cabinet during Trump's administration. Why do you think leaks happen in an administration or at the Pentagon? Because someone that is of decision authority makes a decision that goes counter to the expert's opinion, the expert's recommendation. So they leak it out and they try to create a fuss in the news, trying to change the decision maker within the administration. Now, it could be a lower decision maker for a lower issue, or it can be all the way up to the presidency. But our constitutional republic is predicated on the ability of the president to make the decisions, as long as they're legal. And telling Air Force One to go back to Washington so he can be in control of the situation is the presidential's the president's prerogative. It's the presidential's authority that supersedes the Secret Service. So we have to be very careful here that the presidency is captured. George Bush Jr. during 9/11 was captured in Air Force One by the Secret Service. And George Bush did not have much control. And those Secret Service agents should have lost their job, and they should have been held on criminal charges of a coup or inhibiting the authority of the president. They should have been held accountable. Now, politically, because of all of the problems that was going on during 9/11, Bush didn't do that. But what happened on Air Force One should have never have happened. And so what has happened over time is that we have had this deep state, this technocracy that's coming in that wants to circumvent the authority of the presidency. The president should be able to get on the plane of Air Force One and say, take me to Disneyland, and they have to do it. If he says, I want to go in the middle of a cornfield, they need to do it. Whatever you want. If he said, let's go to Alaska or let's go to, whatever he wants, that's what happens. The Secret Service doesn't have an opinion on this. Whatever his decision is, they have to make it such that it is as safe as possible. But they need to follow his authority. But they thought they knew better. Bush should have been in Washington, D.C. They should have flown back to Washington, D.C. because one, it shows leadership, and two, you wouldn't have had the miscommunication that was going on in those early hours of 9/11. That first 6 hours was critical. And literally, George Bush was in the dark. So do we really want to have a technocracy? Do we really want to have a technocracy telling the presidency what he can or cannot do? They're eroding the presidency. There is a group out there that is over and beyond the government that is actually trying to inhibit the power of the presidency. Is it from the Chatham House in England? Maybe. Is it the CFR in the United States? I don't know. Maybe it's above them. But there is this technocracy that is taking hold in the United States. It's a major problem. And a lot of people I didn't know about what happened on Air Force One during 9/11, but there was a coup. There was a coup. The Secret Service prevented George Bush on having control of the situation. The Secret Service was in charge. That is totally unacceptable. Now listen to the memoir, listen or read the memoirs of some of these recent presidents. They all say that when they are talking about the Pentagon, memoirs of what was happening in the first administration with Trump were saying that you had generals that didn't want to listen to Trump in terms of trying to de-escalate from Afghanistan. You had people within the cabinet that were leaking and also slow walking his policies. That's very similar to what was happening with the Secret Service during 9/11, circumventing the power of the presidency. Barack Obama, in his memoir, stated that he was having problems with the Pentagon, trying to de-escalate in Iraq. People supposedly knew better in the Pentagon, not listening to the President of the United States. If the President of the United States says, I want to end the war, we're getting out, and this is the date, the Pentagon needs to do it. No, you have people dug in, not listening. And this is the reason why Pete Hegseth is cleaning house. So it's really important to realize that this entrenched intelligentsia, this deep state, thinks they know better, and they'll either use political means, violent means, economic means to get their way. But they know better. The paper belt, the intelligentsia of the Boss-Wash corridor, they know better. Really? It doesn't seem like it's constitutional.
They were updating the president frequently, but they didn't want him to be on that line. They were concerned that he was so impatient as he was watching those developments that they didn't have him doing the minute-to-minute call. But to be fair, to be sure, he was being updated regularly in that weekend when those airmen were down.
Jonathan, off of what Annie just said about the president doing this to speak in a way that the Iranians understood, I have heard from Arab leaders in the region, several over the past year, that they actually, I'm just reporting, they actually like the fact, as one told me after these posts, that the mullahs now have to deal with someone who is, quote, crazier than they are. Other diplomats across the region have said he actually thinks like an Arab leader. He doesn't think like an American leader. Donald Trump thinks and talks like the sort of leaders that we grew up with. And if that throws the Iranians off, you Americans may not understand this, but we're totally fine with it, which I found to be fascinating. Yes, I do have a problem with it. I have a problem with all of it. That said, even this past week, I heard again, as I've been hearing for a year.
It's too easy for some liberal saying, "Oh, I have a problem with what Trump is doing. I have a problem with the way he speaks." Solve the problem. It's a 47-year problem. The Shiite religion is crazy. Pay attention. You don't believe me? Why don't you actually go on YouTube and actually watch about 4 or 5 hours of documentaries about the situation, about the history of Iran? And I'm telling you, we've done some stupid things, especially the CIA and MI6. But the thing is that this is a hornet's nest, and we got to solve this problem now, or it's going to be a big problem later. But the intelligentsia knows better. Really? I don't think so, because the intelligentsia has been kicking the can down the road for the last 47 years. It's time to kill them. It's time to kill our enemies. There's nothing wrong with that. Well, that's a war crime. Oh, you can't do that. That's a war crime. See, once again, you have a legal apparatus and an intelligentsia apparatus trying to circumvent what the president can do. Scare them with legality, scare them with leaks, scare them with a less cohesive cabinet. Demonize them in the news. Is that the right policy? Do we want the Shias to rise up with weapons of mass destruction? Do we really want that? Is that what the intelligentsia wants? The intelligentsia allowed for a nuclear capability in North Korea. The intelligentsia allowed for Pakistan and India to have nuclear weapons. The intelligentsia led to nuclear proliferation. The world's not safer because of the intelligentsia. It's a lot worse off because of the intelligentsia. Before we continue with Morning Joe, who happened to stop politics because his intern ended up dying for some reason, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the Myotrol. This will help to build muscle. If you're 40 years of age, male or female, you can't build muscle and maintain muscle as easily as when you were younger. This will help with the gene expression to build muscle and maintain muscle. Do some resistance training, take the Myotrol, and you'll be able to improve your musculature. And by improving your musculature, you're increasing the concentrations of myokines and increasing the concentration of BDNF, which are neuroprotective, super important. Building muscle will literally help your brain. All right? So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and beware of the Boss Wash corridor and the paper belt. Beware of the intelligentsia. Beware of them circumventing the power of the presidency, because that's exactly what's happening. Please go to my store and get the clarity factor so you can see the world like I do. All right? You'll get rid of that brain fog. You'll be able to concentrate on tasks. Your memory and your cognition will improve. Your neurons will link up more. You'll have positive neuroplasticity, and you're improving your brain. Please go to my store and get the Clarity Factor. It's a great neurostack. Drink it with filtered water. So a great stack to help with your musculature and your brain function. Myotrol and Clarity Factor. And like I said, building more muscle is actually going to help with brain function. It's not just helping with your musculature and helping with bone density, because more muscle will also improve your bone density. But it's important to get those myokine concentrations up so you have more neural protection. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Don't be a Morning Joe.
He's the only American president that can strike fear in the hearts of Iranians. Well, I would say, and also in the hearts of everybody that lives in Washington and across America.
Yeah, no question there. White House aides, as Annie reported, anxious at the time. A lot of them since that post have sounded, well, it worked. Look, they got Iran to agree to the ceasefire. Like, these sets up the table for negotiations, like sort of defending it in retrospect. The madman theory, if you will, that you just outlined, Joe, that it's impossible to predict Trump, so therefore you have to fear the worst. And that's all this was, part of the deal, that stuff. We'll see. But Annie, the other thing that your story illustrates well is, though Trump this time, second term, far more likely to authorize military force than in the first, but he's still hesitant to cross the threshold of deploying ground troops. He's still very nervous about American lives lost in themselves would be terrible, but also the political ramifications of that. So speak to us about that still, that hesitation, and what we could learn from it as we consider what could come next, because the fate of these negotiations is still very much in doubt. Trump may need to escalate further and actually to get this war to close if it can't be done on the negotiating table in Islamabad the next couple of days.
Yeah, I was really struck in talking to some of the people around the president and his advisors and some of his informal advisors, the extent to which he has brought up in conversations Jimmy Carter and how Jimmy Carter's experience in Iran, this exact regime that President Trump has been bombing, but how Jimmy Carter's experience in Iran has loomed large as he's been weighing what to do. And he has even spoken, the president has spoken publicly about this in a March event in Florida. He brought up Jimmy Carter as he was talking about he was ticking off Democratic failures in foreign policy, but he dwelled at length about Jimmy Carter, something that his friends have said and people who have spoken to him have said he has talked about privately as well. So his hesitance on putting troops on the ground is real. He's very concerned about how that would be. He has not been in a position before of sending troops in harm's way in this way. That is not to say he won't do it. And his advisors have been very clear with us that remains on the table. It's not something that they're going to take off. But he has said, troops going to Kyrgyz Island, would they be sitting ducks? Would they all be killed? And that is a very real fear that he has articulated.
And for good reason. And Annie, I couldn't help but notice the picture that accompanied your story, at least when I read it online, had so many parallels with the failed 1980 Operation Eagle Claw, the failed operation to rescue the Iranian hostages back in 1980. Obviously, that parallel haunts the president, doesn't it?
It really does. It's something that we have heard he talks about extensively. And this is a time in his life when he was coming of age. He paid close attention to the news, as we know. But he would be he is one of 7 presidents to be bedeviled by this national security threat that Iran has faced. And he has thought about how other presidents have attempted to handle it and failed. Yep. So it is on his mind.
All right, White House reporter for the Wall Street Journal, Annie Linsky, thank you very much for your reporting. The new reporting is available to read online right now.
All right. Let's listen to Fox dealing with this Queens chaos that took place. A mob took over a corner of Queens.
If you experience sexual abuse at any of the New York City juvenile centers, schools, hospitals, universities.
Chaos in Queens, a reckless drag racing mob waving Palestinian flags and wreaking fiery havoc right here in New York City. The street takeover involved more than 100 cars. And at one point, 3 people jumped on a police car, cracked its windshield. Former NYPD Chief of Department John Schell joins us now. Chief, it's so great to have you on today. What the heck? How does that happen?
Well, this has been going on for years with these car meets on those mopeds and quads. And we were dealing with it for like 3 years. And you really have to have a strategic response to this. Cops just can't show up and think you're going to deal with that. You're not. So in 3 years of us going after it, when I say going after it, aviation, hundreds of cops, checkpoints, we took over 100,000 of these cars and bikes off the street in 3 years. It's something you have to stay on top of. And it was the #1 community complaint in the city, regardless of where you were from. When you see this, as a New Yorker, lawlessness, do whatever I want, no consequences, you have to stay on top of this, and it can be done. This really is disgusting to watch.
Yeah. Is this worse than it was before? Are you seeing an uptick?
I've seen an uptick, and how do you know what's working? #1, when you don't see it, and when you see calls for service go down for, like, we call them roving bands, reckless driving, we kicked them in their tails. We were in their social groups, and they were scared of us. They knew we were out there. They would say, let's go to Jersey. I'd say, see you later. But it was not. But there was. I was telling Riff, there's something great when you make some arrests and a couple of cars get away, but you get their license plate, and you show up at their doorstep three days later, and you show mom and dad their $50,000 car on the back of a tow truck and say bye. Bye. Thank you. So you're donating to the city of New York. Thank you. You got to send that message, and it's got to be consequences.
Did the parents play a role in this?
Some do, some don't. But some of these aren't kids. Some of these are adults, 30, 40 years, and they'll tell you, well, we have nowhere to go. And our response will grow up, first of all, drive like a normal person. But the reckless driving piece, the district attorney has to be on board. This is a felony. or a misdemeanor. There's got to be consequences.
Somebody could be killed easily. That car goes out of control and goes in a crowd.
Absolutely.
And John, so why are they doing it? I mean, why? Because we see this in D.C. as well. It's in other cities.
Well, but these car groups, they want to show off their cars. They actually think they're not doing anything wrong, to be honest with you. There's spots throughout the city that are known. We used to set up on those spots and wait for them to get there and take their cars. But they have nowhere to go, to tell you. And so they think they can take up the street. But some of these are young kids. That's very dangerous. Setting a fire in the street, hanging out windows. I'll tell you right now, some of those kids have guns on them. Absolutely. I know. It's hard to believe.
I still remember Rebel Without a Cause. I mean, they weren't somewhere like where nobody was at. Like it wasn't in the middle of a street like this. I mean, this has been going on for a long time.
This is what you have to, like, the NYPD has to stay on top of this. You can't expect a local precinct with 5 or 6 cars at 3 o'clock in the morning thinking to combat that.
And why aren't they, do you think?
Well, it's not the precinct. They have to know where it's happening, but you have to have like hundreds of cops working in addition to the precinct. So you can cut up bridges, getaway plans.
Yeah.
Is this a leadership issue? Is this Mondani not making this a priority?
Well, I would say yes to that. Number two, no cop right now is going to be that proactive to push the envelope in the gray area, because if something goes wrong, the mayor's not going to have their back. They're not going to do it. The NYPD now has to become reactive, not proactive.
Bingo.
But you've got Tish Stay. So with the mayor's relationship, and you see things like this, you would think Mamdani would be out there just vociferously condemning this and backing the blue on something like that. Instead, he's holding a event with Barack Obama singing "The Wheels on the Bus Go Round and Round."
Right. Well, the wheels on these cars go round and round as it's destroying a community. Okay. Yeah. He doesn't back the NYPD. The commissioners go over here and the mayor's over here. I know what she wants to do. Trust me, she's very proactive. But if the mayor's not going to back the being proactive, you're going to get this. And then this is April. Wait until June and July pop up.
Great point.
Chief, great to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chief.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now.
Out of control kids, out of control adults. Why? Because of poor upbringing. They lost the pillars of society, of God, country, and family. It's that simple. It's that simple. And the foundation of that is the Enlightenment, where it's about life, liberty, and property. But when you don't have respect for property, when you don't have respect for life, you get this crap. Big problem in the United States. And it's time that a lot of these kids start getting some discipline. And this is why I think it's super important that there should be mandatory service in the United States. For 2 years, mandatory service. And that way they have some money for college. They know how to make a bed. They know how to brush their teeth. And they get some discipline. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nanosilver gel. I have 2 types. You can get it in the tube form or the quick dispenser form. But these gels are dual purpose. They will help to improve your skin. You can use them as a daily topical skincare. You can put it on a cut, an abrasion, or a minor burn, and it'll help to heal it quicker, about 1/3 of the time quicker. And if you're not feeling well because of the cold season, or someone around you is not feeling well because of the cold season, you can put it on your hands. It stays active for 5.5 hours. You can put it around your mouth, around your eyes, around your nose, around your ears, lightly coat your nostrils. It stays active for 5.5 hours. Now, if you're cleaning your house because of, spring cleaning or the garage or whatever, by putting the gel in your nostrils, lightly coat the nostrils, you'll be able to neutralize anything that you're breathing in. So it's really important. So please go to my store. It's a very high quality product. It has the structural nanosilver. Use it. Have some at home, have some at work. You never know when you need it. It's a very high quality product. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5. You get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. Let's listen into Fox News. Fox Business.
Hike the world's best trails. Trucktravel.com.
Welcome back. CENTCOM releasing new video overnight of U.S. forces taking over an Iranian cargo ship after a 6-hour standoff. The cargo ship was trying to break past the U.S.'s naval blockade. The ship, called Tauska, reportedly spent much of the last year moving between China and Iran. Hundreds of commercial tankers are now stranded on both sides of the strait after Iran halted traffic in the strait over the weekend, reversing course on its decision to effectively open it on Friday, agreeing with the United States. Tehran now telling shippers they must use new traffic lanes along the Iranian coast. But President Trump told me yesterday on the phone that it was the U.S. who closed the strait because of the blockade. U.S. officials are gearing up for another round of talks in Pakistan tonight. The Iranians, however, still no response on this meeting. The state media is suggesting that Iran might not show up, although AP reported this morning that the meeting is on, and President Trump told me yesterday a deal will be signed tonight. Meanwhile, House Democrats are now discussing plans to force a vote on an Iran war powers resolution every day until one passes or U.S. operations in the region end as the conflict approaches the 60-day mark. February 28th is when it started. Joining me now is California Congressman Ro Khanna. Congressman, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here.
Good to see you, Maria.
And I want to get your take on where we are. You introduced a bill to stop U.S. oil exports during the conflict in Iran. Why do you want to stop U.S. oil exports during this conflict?
Maria, it's common sense. Why would we be sending our oil overseas when Americans are getting fleeced at the pump? When gas has gone from $2.30 to $4, we should have our oil supply for Americans, and that would bring down the price. This was a giveaway in 2015 to the big oil companies. Yeah, it's good for them. It's not good for the average consumer.
I don't know if it's a giveaway, really, but the truth is the president told the nation just the other day, and we know this to be true, that the U.S. is producing more oil and gas. Under Joe Biden, the Democrats do not want to see drill, baby, drill, right?
The U.S. was producing, as you know, more oil and gas at a record level, even under Joe Biden. The point is, though, why are we exporting it? And Maria, the biggest point is, why have we gotten into a war that has led to the closing of the Strait of Hormuz? The strait was perfectly open 60 days ago. And, you know, I talked, as I know you do, I talked to some of the senior finance guys at Wall Street, JP Morgan, others. They thought that this war would have been over in 3 weeks. This war has gone on 60 days. It's hurting the economy. It's putting our lives at risk. We've got Khamenei Jr. in charge, who is actually more hardline with the IRGC. We have a worse regime in there. What have we achieved?
Are you saying that you do not think it's a good idea to defang Iran from having a nuclear weapon?
Absolutely, we should do that. But this is not achieving that. We now have Khamenei Jr. who actually wants to
do that. So, Congressman, how do you expect to do that?
I'll tell you how
your plan? Hold on. What is your plan to ensure that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon?
Well, this is not doing it. This is putting Iran closer on the trajectory of a nuclear weapon because Khamenei Sr., who we assassinated.
That's not true. That's not true. President Obama.
Let me just finish, Maria. Let me just finish.
Okay, go ahead.
Let me finish.
Go ahead.
You know, look, Khamenei Jr. is saying he wants to develop it. The more hardline IRGC is in. What we need is the enriched uranium. Even Vice President Vance acknowledges it. That is underground. You can't bomb to get that. You need diplomacy. We should be sitting down with Oman, with other nations. Now that maybe we have leverage, we should be getting a deal. But to be threatening to wipe out Iranian civilization, to be threatening to blockade the Strait of Hormuz and close it, hurting the economy, that's just not rational policy.
Now, President, look, are you saying that you want diplomacy with Iran and you think that they're going to tell you the truth? They just told us months ago that they did not have any long-range missiles, and then they sent a long-range missile to the Diego Garcia Island. So I'm just trying to understand what your plan would be to defang Iran from a nuclear weapon, because right now, as the president has said many times, Iran's Navy is gone, the Air Force is gone, the leadership is gone, and yes, it impacted the economy, and the Iranian people are begging President Trump to finish the job. I mean, we had on Reza Pahlavi, a ton of other Iranian citizens who say, please, President Trump, help us. So exactly what are you saying? You're saying you would rather the president do diplomatic talks, and you think they're going to tell us the truth?
Maria, I'll tell you what the Iranian people are not begging for. They're not begging for Donald Trump to wipe out Iranian civilization. They're not begging for him to blow up every power plant and threaten war crimes. And they don't like the fact that we have actually a more hardline regime in there. They have not created a regime that is respecting human rights or protesters. And the reality is, yes, I don't trust Iran.
Hold on.
Obviously, Reagan had said trust to verify.
You can't sit there and tell me that you are talking about Iran's human rights when the way they treat women and the way they treat citizens.
How's biz, Ash? Great, especially with the help of zero accounting software. I can keep my cash flow flowing by giving customers more ways to pay.
Search zero with the net.
iExcel is helping 15 million students succeed in math and language arts. On iExcel, your child
There moral equivalence between the way President Trump treats citizens and the. Are you putting an equivalency there?
No, I'm not putting an equivalency. What I'm saying is that we have not created a regime that actually is respecting human rights. We have a regime that is more hardline. There is no democracy emerging. There is no regime that's actually closer to the United States. Actually, you know what we've done is we've increased China's role in the region. Now they want to have oil transactions in the yuan, not in the dollar. And so what we've done is actually lost influence in that region, and we haven't gotten the enriched uranium. I mean, that is the problem.
Well, I think that President Trump is trying to negotiate that, and he told me yesterday directly that he's expecting a deal to be signed tonight in Pakistan. I want to move on to other issues because I know you're doing a lot, Congressman, and we appreciate that. But here's my final question on this issue. Are you suggesting that Obama's leadership on Iran was better? Because under President Obama, there were 14 wire transfers to a, hold on. There were 14 wire transfers to a Swiss account linked to Hezbollah between 2014 and 2016. That was a total of $1.7 billion. The same $1.7 billion he told Congress was frozen Iranian assets. Now, there was a back channel to Tehran through Valerie Jarrett, active for 2012 to 2024. This was after he left office. So, you know, it was almost like a shadow government. He also sent pellets of cash in a plane to Iran. Now, why would you send money to Iran knowing that they are building a nuclear weapon and they are the leading sponsor of terrorism?
Barack Obama was a great statesman who left America much safer. I wouldn't put Donald Trump in the same paragraph. The reality is when President Obama left, because of the great efforts of people like Valerie Jarrett.
The Middle East didn't like Barack Obama. The Israelis didn't like Barack Obama. Barack Obama was apologetic about our hegemonic power post-World War II, and he was apologetic to the Europeans. There was zero respect of Chinese diplomats with Barack Obama. What is this guy? This guy is not even paying attention to reality here.
We had 97% of the enriched uranium out. The reality is we didn't have 13 American service members dead. The reality is we never had gas go up from $2.30 to $4. The reality is we did not give China more role in the region. Let me finish, Maria. I'll let you finish.
Okay,
we didn't give China more role in the region. We did not give the IRGC a more hardline regime in there. You know why? Because Obama actually did his homework. He actually tried to engage in statesmanship. He got China, Russia, the the entire European allies on board with getting Iran on a path to not having a nuclear weapon. All Trump did is listen to Netanyahu. That's his entire foreign policy. And you know what? I resent the fact that Israel is going to tell the United States what to do. The American president should call the shots in this country.
And well, the American president should call the shots in this country, but you and your colleagues are trying to clip his wings right now with this war powers vote. I agree, the president is in charge. But look, a lot of the things that you just said are just not true, Congressman. I mean, look, we have to look at this realistically. And President Obama sent money to the Iranians. And what did they do? They resumed their buildup of enrichment.
That's not true.
Yeah,
Not true.
What's not true? What's not true? What specifically about that sentence is not true?
There was a deal that we reached to get 97% of the enriched uranium out. In the process of that, Iran had certain assets that were Iranian assets, wasn't our money, that was unfrozen. And that was a deal that China, Russia, France, UK, Canada, the United States all agreed to. And then you had
President
Netanyahu
Obama
come in and try to torpedo it, and AIPAC tried to torpedo that deal. We were on a path to having a denuclear Iran, but what happened is it wasn't in Netanyahu's interest and AIPAC's interest, and they've dragged us into another war in the Middle East. They've hurt America.
And he's missing a major piece of this. The Iranians, under the Obama administration, under the Trump 1.0 administration, and the Biden administration, were building up rocketry, missile, and drone capability to create a shield to hide behind, to be able to develop their nuclear program. And this was well said by Secretary Rubio. The Iranians were given time and money to be able to build a defensive and offensive capability. Barack Obama failed. Trump 1.0 failed. Biden administration failed. Bush Jr. failed. Clinton failed. Bush Sr. failed. Reagan failed. Carter failed. It's time to get the job done.
American people, and the American people are tired of it. They want people who are going to be Team America. They want people who are going to bring gas prices down here and care about our nation and get us out of these wars. And that's why Obama won. He was against the Iraq war. That's why he was on a path to normalization in terms of getting Iran to be denuclear, but it had the whole world on our side. And AIPAC, Netanyahu tore that up.
Relax. Congressman, it doesn't change the fact that 10 presidents before President Trump
I'm having
all
trouble
said the
hearing
same
you.
thing.
I think there's some connection issue. Now I can hear you.
Congressman, it doesn't change the fact that 10 presidents before President Trump all said the same thing. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. They are the leading state sponsor of terrorism. They cannot have a nuclear weapon.
One president delivered, and that was Barack Obama.
No, that's not true. Not one
Barack
of them did
Obama is the only one who delivered.
Congressman, you're talking fantasy.
97%
Obama did
out.
nothing about it. You're talking fantasy. Obama did nothing about it. Other than send money to the
Obama
Iranians.
got the whole world. He didn't send money to them. That's just factually false. He unfroze Iranian assets, but he had the whole world behind us. How many countries do we have behind us now? Obama had Russia, China, Canada, UK, France, the whole world on board, and they lost 97%.
We're going to go to MS Now about Kash Patel filing a lawsuit, it looks like. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Max 35er Cleanse. This will help to boost up your immune system. Take a teaspoon a day every day, swish in your mouth, gargle about 20 seconds, and swallow it. What this will do is improve your oral cavity, help the health of your oral pharynx, maintain a mucosal barrier, and help the health of your epithelial cells. Super important. And it will help to neutralize. You can use this, especially if you're not feeling well because of the cold season or because you're doing spring cleaning or allergies, but take it every day. Take a teaspoon a day every day. If you're not feeling well because of the cold season or allergies, take a tablespoon. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Max 35 or Cleanse and take it every day. I've been doing this protocol for over 6 years, every day. And I have a great new product on my store called Super Strong Relief. This will help with arthritic pain, muscle aches, sprains, tension headaches, bruising. If you want to relieve the pain quickly, within about 90 seconds, take the Super Strong Relief. It's a topical. You just rub it in the area that's hurting you, and you will feel it, the relief or the pain eliminated within 90 seconds or so. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Super Strong Relief. And again, this helps with arthritis. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. If you get an order that's higher than $100, guess what? You're going to get a free gift. Make sure you use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. All right, let's listen in. What's Kash Patel doing?
Finance the old way. Finance the ramp way.
Born in Saint-Tropez in 1971, safe to say we grew up in the sun.
Welcome back. FBI Director Kash Patel on defense this morning, denying allegations laid out in a new report detailing his alleged drinking habits and absences from the Bureau. This article in The Atlantic cites more than 24 people, including unnamed current and former FBI officials, who allege excessive drinking and erratic behavior, described as, quote, freakouts from Patel. Several officials cited say Patel is known for, quote, obvious intoxication at private clubs, both here in Washington and in Las Vegas, and that many staffers are just waiting for the announcement that Patel is going to be fired from his post, citing his unreachability and impulsivity. The Atlantic also wrote that President Trump has complained Patel has seemed unprepared for TV appearances and that some investigations he directed Patel to pursue haven't moved quickly enough. Patel took to social media to defend himself, writing in part, quote, no amount of BS you write will ever deter this FBI from making America safe again. Yesterday, he announced on Fox News that, plus his plans to sue The Atlantic for defamation. But notably, he also took time in that interview to promise that the DOJ would soon be making arrests related to the 2020 election. Watch.
Every time I see President Trump, he says this repeatedly, that the election was rigged in 2020. I mean, he says it all the time. We all know that. And it's almost getting lost because he says it so much. You've been at the FBI now 14 months. Have you done anything about that? And do you have anything to tell us about that?
Absolutely, Maria. Look, I've been with the president nearly since day one on this. We've got all the evidence. I can announce on your show that we've got all the information we need. We're working with our prosecutors at the Department of Justice and their Attorney General Todd Blanche, and we are going to be making arrests, and it's coming, and I promise you, it's coming soon.
I want to bring in MS Now senior national security reporter David Rode. David, we're going to dig into why I thought it was so notable that Patel would use that appearance on Maria Bartiromo's show to announce some potential investigations around the 2020 election that Trump lost. But first, I want to focus on this story by our former colleague, Sarah Fitzpatrick, where she talked to 24 people for it. And there were a lot of allegations within it. I wonder which stood out to you the most and what you make about the atmosphere that it paints around Kash Patel and the FBI.
First of all, MS Now hasn't been able to corroborate or confirm the specific allegations in the report. But it comes as there's been a series of reporting by our colleagues, Ken Delaney and Carol Leonnig, about how he has conducted himself. One pattern has been that when he's criticized in the press, this was according to the FBI Agents Association, that's sort of the union that
This is what I'm talking about. You have the intelligentsia that doesn't like something, maybe because he's going to have the FBI do some arrests or shine a light on some of the nefarious activities of the deep state or whatever, and there's some sort of conflict in the media and it creates a political football. This just is, this screams the intelligentsia play where you have individuals wanting to shine a light of the nefarious activities. And they're coming up with stories, leak it to the, to some sort of organization, media organization, or some magazine or whatever, create a stir. Maybe he gets fired. Maybe there's a congressional investigation or whatever. And this is so, I'll tell you, it is so obvious. It is so obvious that whenever people get close to what really happened with certain major events in our history, and there was some sort of intelligentsia move because of it, that may have been unconstitutional, or there was some big political play that was going on, they pull out these kinds of these tactics. This almost seems like a left-wing conspiracy, but I'll tell you, it's amazing. It's amazing how the deep state, that paper belt, just convulses whenever you have anyone that's going against the grain.
Presents FBI agents. When he's criticized, there's subsequently been firings, and that this has been firings. There was specific firings recently about FBI agents who were in a counter-espionage unit. This was before the war began with Iran, but those kind of firings, the concerns are from current and former agents that they weaken the country in terms of defending it when it is at war. And so that's one element of his leadership that I think has frustrated folks.
Yeah, I think that's the underlying premise, too, in the Atlantic story, this idea that his behavior allegedly is one thing, but then the impact on the Bureau itself and America's national security is the other, and that's really of paramount importance. But the other piece of this for Patel is, how do you end up keeping your job? Because there were large questions looming in the aftermath of Pam Bondi's firing about if Patel was next. And I think when I see him go on Fox News and say, we're going to be making arrests connected to the 2020 election, it does seem like things we've seen other people in his position do to try to shore up their position in Trump's eyes. Okay, I'm in a bad place. Let me move on something I know the president cares about.
Yes, and so in terms of the 2020 election, these are old claims by President Trump. His attorney general in 2020, Bill Barr, a deep conservative, disagreed with the president and told the president, you did not win the 2020 election. He subsequently resigned. Chris Wray, who was appointed by President Trump, chosen by President Trump, did not find evidence of any of these crimes that it sounds like Patel says there are going to be arrests regarding. So it's concerning, and many courts have reviewed these claims and dismissed them. So if there are arrests coming, I don't understand what the evidence is. So we just have to see if these arrests actually happen.
I think that's the piece of it, David. For those of us who are watching, whether it's Kash Patel saying arrests are coming around 2020, whether it's Tulsi Gabbard going to the Fulton County Board of Elections, we are watching these embattled Trump officials try to make something out of debunked conspiracy theories. And I wonder, when you put your national security hat on, as it always is, what you see in those attempts as we head into the November elections, where there is widespread concern about what election security might look like and ensuring that elections stay free and fair.
I'm very concerned. Just last week, Tulsi Gabbard made a criminal referral to the Justice Department regarding the first impeachment of Donald Trump. This would be back in his first term, and it was a criminal referral to the whistleblower who alerted first the intelligence community about the call between President Trump and Ukrainian President Zelensky. The allegation was that Trump threatened to withhold aid from Ukraine if it didn't investigate Joe Biden at the time. This was a call in 2019. And this criminal referral involved the whistleblower themselves, who's remained anonymous, and then the Inspector General of the intelligence community at that time, Michael Atkinson. He found it to be a credible and urgent threat. That's the definition for what needs to go to Congress, and Atkinson sent it to Congress. But now Tulsi Gabbard has referred them for criminal investigation. It's not definite they're going to be charged, but that's just another example of what you're describing.
Yeah, attempts to rewrite history, despite the fact that courts, as you mentioned, in many of these scenarios around 2020, and in the situation that you're mentioning as well, have found that there's no there, and yet we know it remains a priority of the president. MS Now senior national security reporter David Rode, thank you as always.
All right. That's the end of my show today. Thank you for listening. I greatly appreciate the ones that have been watching on Rumble and YouTube. The equity market is trading at 7,096 right now. Things are somewhat stable, and oil is trading at $87 a barrel. Thank you for listening. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the great products that I offer. Take the supplements regularly. Pay attention to the stacking that I mentioned throughout this broadcast, and you will slow down the aging process. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.